Okay, I have no idea who's gonna show up. This is a very spontaneous live stream at the worst possible time of the week, Wednesday morning. I'm just gonna give it a minute and see what happens. Oh, good lab. Already someone who I recognize as a regular of the occasional streams here. What's up, man? We're going to have a very, it could be very funny, or very insufferable, or a bit of both. I'm just gonna quickly put myself up here, so people understand, have a bit of an idea of what this is going to be about. How are you, man? I'm a bit early, so I want to give it like a minute or two. We're supposed to be starting at 9:30, but I'm not always too punctual with this stuff. Well, apparently there's already 3 people in here, but the analytics are never really good. Anyone else in here? Don't be shy. People go into the stream, they see what we're about to watch, and they're like, oh hell no. I don't know if I can make it through this. Going home from work by foot, nice distraction you're giving me here. You just finished work? Oh, you're aren't you German? So you'd be 6 or 7 hours ahead of me, that makes sense. Oh, there you go. But hey, glad to have you here again. I have no idea how this stream is gonna go. Some of them have done very well, some of them don't really go anywhere, you know how it is. Yeah, I remember. I remember seeing you in my streams with the Manosphere stuff. Are you in the live stream on my Warband content or the regular channel too? I don't remember. I think I've seen you there, but I'm not sure. Not sure yourself? That's alright. Okay, we're about to start soon. Apparently we got 3 people in here. Okay, well, seems about as far as it's gonna go. I see like 2 more people in here. Like I said, don't be shy, guys. Otherwise, I'm sure you'll enjoy the stream quietly. Alright, let's get into it. So, oh, well, just as I say that, we got someone else. Lucas, hello, welcome to the stream. Is it in Canada easy to walk home from work? Depends on where you live, naturally. When I lived in Montreal, I had to take the commute to get to work, and that was like a good 45 minutes back and forth. That was a pain in the ass. Loving the beard? Thank you! I just cleaned it up yesterday. I also shaved my head, but that was a slaughter. I got like 100 different cuts on my head. Still hurts. But like right now where I live, I'm like within walking distance of like everything. I mean, like I can reach pretty much anywhere I need to go. 90% of the places I need to go I can reach in like less than 5 minutes of walking, which is amazing. Very good location. I also happen to work across the street, so that's very lucky for me. But my girlfriend, she has to drive to work. Anywho, so today I want to try something a little different. Now, Professor Dave, I discovered him a few months ago, and I was watching some of his stuff, and I really do mean like some, not everything, because obviously a lot of his science content, like I'm just not equipped to understand. So even some of the debates he's had with some people pertaining to science, evolution, even flat Earth. Like I know the Earth isn't flat, I don't need to be convinced, but like as entertaining as I find him to be sometimes, it's not like I always have like the knowledge to just follow along with most of what he's saying. So some of his videos I find very interesting, some of the videos is just beyond my own level of understanding. Anywho, I bring him up because also like it was very surprising to see him go against Metatron like a few months ago, and it was even more surprising to find that he shouted me out in one of these videos. Now, this isn't me, to be clear, trying to glaze him here by making more content surrounding around Professor Dave or even Metatron. There's something different that's happening. Last weekend, I, was doing chores, and then I saw this video in my feed, which is Professor Dave who went on some guy's podcast to talk about science. I watched it for about an hour, and I got so frustrated with the podcast bro Danny Jones. He is so insufferable that I decided to stop the video, and I thought to myself, like, maybe I'll actually do like a commentary reaction afterwards, because I feel like there's something worthwhile to be pointed out here. So I'm not going in necessarily rooting for Dave, even though like I agree with him, or even to defend him or at all. Like it's more like there's this recurrent issue that I myself have had on my channel before even I was mentioned by Professor Dave. And for context, I feel like one of my issues, not just as a content creator, but as someone who is a lot into online politics, someone who argues with a lot of people on Discord or just on social media in general, as part of my own learning curve, I feel sometimes like I fail to get to the underlying issue of people's belief systems. Basically, I've dealt with a few people like this, the most insufferable people that I've had to debate. I didn't have to, but you know what I mean. The most insufferable people that I've debated before. I call them pseudo-intellectual contrarians. Basically people whose entire shtick is not having an actual position, but rather being in a perpetual state of skepticism. The moment you bring up anything, whether it's history or science or just academia in general, they constantly question everything, and it's like the mere act of questioning it is what makes them feel smart. And then when you try and dig deeper into like what they actually believe, they could be anti-vax, they could be climate deniers, they could be COVID-19 conspiracy theorists or whatever. And that's what makes it very difficult to debate with some of these people, because if those are the things they believe, they don't really tend to come outright and say it. Instead, they just have a lot of questions. Instead, they just like have a lot of things, that they saw from the mainstream academia and the news media about how like clearly none of it can be trusted, but then they proceed to be like, oh, but like all these other skeptics, they have some very interesting stuff to say, even though a lot of them would be like completely debunked by their respective academic fields. They could have been mocked, they could have had their licenses revoked, and it always revolves around like this narrative of like, oh, they're being censored. You know what I mean? I've debated a few people like this, and it's always the same thing. And one of the ways that I would, one of the core patterns that I notice is the weaponizing of science against itself. A clear example of this. Let me see here. Let me just go to my videos. There you go. One of the most educational, one of the videos through which I learned a lot for myself was in my second essay on Metatron, the truth about Metatron once and for all. In that video, one of the main things I've learned while making this video, and one of the things that really changed the way I think of science and the way I think of history, is by understanding the concept of historical revisionism. I'm not going to sum up the whole video here, but to try and break it down as best I can. When people today, right, use the term historical revisionism, they always use it the wrong way. People use the term historical revisionism to mean every time someone is distorting history to fit a specific narrative, right? That's not the real definition of revisionism. Revisionism is a real academic process within historiography to get as close to the truth, to the historical truth as possible. The whole point behind it is basically revisionism is the process through which you reanalyze historical evidence to see if you can reach new interpretations, new conclusions. Different historians have different biases and different perspectives that as they analyze the evidence, they can come to different interpretations. That's not to say that historical revisionism means that, well, we'll get at that. I'm going to try and stay in focus. Sorry, guys, I'm not used to live streaming still. But the example I used, for example, in my video on Metatron, a clear-cut example of historical revisionism is how the Titanic, the ship, when it sank, a lot of people at the time did not believe it broke in half, right? Now today, if you watch the movie Titanic, you see the ship split in half, and that's basically what everyone who knows anything about the Titanic assumes, that when it sank, it broke in half. But for most of the first 67 years that the ship sunk, most people assume it didn't break, and that had to do with some witnesses, some survivors saying it did, and some survivors saying it didn't. We did not actually know for sure until a submarine went to the bottom in the 1980s and actually saw the ship in two pieces several hundred meters away from each other. That's when the historical consensus changed to say, we have new evidence, so now we know for sure it did break in half. That's historical revisionism. That's the process through which you get as close to the historical truth as possible. But one of the things that is essentially central to the study of history, to historical revisionism, is the understanding that no matter how hard you look, no matter how much evidence you have, you will never have a complete 100% picture of history, because that's scientifically impossible. You weren't there. If there was a camera filming the bank robbery, that camera did not catch every single angle. That camera may not have caught the sound, so you can't know exactly what was said or what happened exactly. It is impossible. But the reason you say that in spite of history being impossible to completely rediscover, that you still try your best, is because if you keep in mind the notion that there's always more to discover, you are opening yourself up to the idea that there's more to discover. If at some point you decide, well, no, this is everything we need to know and there is nothing more to learn from this, well, if new evidence presents itself, you're not going to be able to acknowledge it. Now, that's specific to history. Historical revisionism, in that concept, that's specific to historiography, the scientific study of history. But this is also the core basic, from my understanding, for just science in general. Whether you're studying physics or medicine or anything in academia, mathematics, whatever, all of these fields proceed with the notion that there's always something new that can be discovered, and these new discoveries can actually challenge any and all of the things that we already know about science. And the reason they approach it that way is for the same reason. It's because if you think to yourself, nope, there's nothing else to discover, then you are stagnating. But even as you also acknowledge this, you also have to understand that even the process of challenging the academic consensus, while possible, there is a rigorous process that you have to go through. You need to be able to show in very concrete ways why your new discovery disproves what we thought so far was known to be true, right? Now, when I say that the perpetual, skeptical contrarians weaponize science against itself, is because instead of looking at this process of constant discovery, ever improvement of knowledge in science, is because instead of looking at it that way, they go, oh, well, because they make mistakes all the time, we can never believe anything they say. Because we can never know all of history, anything in the past becomes possible. It is possible that aliens built the pyramids. It is possible that all these different things happen differently, but the mainstream academia will never accept it because they're all like in over their heads and they're arrogant and pretentious. And, you know, when you try and present these new things, they're going to try and censor you and stuff like that. And I find that to be like the most frustrating sort of people that I've ever had to argue with. And going back to this guy, this is exactly what I feel is happening the entire time. And one of the things that I wished would happen when you have conversations like these is at some point just be looking at the guy, like this, the guy in question, like Danny Jones. I've never seen him before until I watched this video, and I pretty quickly got the vibe of the of what kind of dude he is. He really just is like a podcast bro through and through. But it's like, I really want to try and understand what are the motivations that drive him and people like him to thinking the way they do. Because you get to the bottom of it and it's like, it doesn't seem like he actually believes anything except the notion of questioning everything that is mainstream and finding anything that is not mainstream to just be very interesting, but not having the qualifications to judge the merits of either. So you're just asking questions without ever coming to an answer, and you reject any answers that are even mildly associated with the mainstream, and I'm just wondering, why? Do you just feel smart from doing that? Or do you actually have some beliefs that you're just stopping shy of saying out loud because you know they're stupid? Like, what is it? You know? It's probably money. Grifters, people who actively say things they don't believe in for the money, in that sense. It is possible. I just feel like once you kind of acknowledge to yourself that you don't really believe what you're saying, I feel like you lose the willingness to put any effort into what you're saying, you know? Having someone like Professor Dave, who is going to challenge you on everything that you've been pushing on your podcast, having him on when you're trying to push a grift is really bad for business. You're going to make a fool of yourself, and you can go, like, I have the video open here, like, keep in mind, like, Professor Dave just made a video, like, yesterday. Made a video yesterday, like, doing his hindsight, and I did not watch it, to be clear, like, his video is right here. I invaded the podcast bro space, they hated it. Like, everyone here, this is a video that's like 3 weeks old, and everyone is mocking that guy. I don't know if it's just like Dave's audience that saw Dave going on that podcast and decided to come in, but like the fact that everyone is bashing that guy in, if he's a grifter just trying to push a specific narrative, this is everything you're trying to avoid here. Because it's just not good for your bottom line in the long run. So the fact that he had Dave on gives me the impression that he's not full-on a grifter. I don't think he's full-on, like, conspiracy brain necessarily. I think he's just a contrarian for the sake of it. And it is so annoying. The need to belong to some group? Maybe. I mean, I know, like, Joe Rogan wants to be the friend of Elon Musk, like, so bad that, like, he forsakens all his reputation just to be friends with Elon Musk and being sent to Mars or something because he's an idiot. But I don't know. To feel powerful about your own destiny in a chaotic world, there's definitely a lot of that too. This is like the guy, the way he talks in the podcast makes it seem like he's got like this very moronic, narrow-minded, individualist view that you associate with the American stereotype. The grifter wants a couple of true believers, not the masses. But where are they? Like, look at these comments. He's getting ratioed. Nobody takes him seriously, but he's been doing that podcast for years. Anywho, so I was watching this podcast, and I was thinking about all this pseudo-intellectual contrarianism that really gets on my nerves. So I stopped halfway because I was getting too frustrated. I thought maybe I would make an actual react to it. And just as I was thinking that yesterday, I saw that Dave made his own recap video on it, and I decided not to watch it so it would not influence my own take. I will definitely watch Dave's video afterwards to see what more he has to add. But for our purpose here today, we're going to be starting the podcast over. There is a very high likelihood that I at least get flagged for copyright. I don't know if I'm gonna get stricken down. This message here, this is from my Tubly downloader thing, which allows me to download YouTube videos whenever I make responses, and it's not even letting me due to copyright restrictions or access limitations. So there's a very high likelihood by reacting that this gets penalized in some capacity. I have no idea. We'll see. But I want to react to it, and just use this podcast conversation to highlight exactly what I'm talking about. This contrarianism that goes nowhere. Literally just let me be skeptical of everything for the sake of it and feel smart about it. That's really all this is. And I can definitely appreciate Dave going on there, and it shows that, like, Dave, like, he will literally talk to anybody, but every single time he does, his positions don't change, they're consistent, and, you know, that's all that matters. So, here we go. I'm finally gonna cut the music. That was a long intro. I spoke for like 23 minutes. Wow. Okay, are you ready, folks? I got it on 1.5 speed. I might skip some sections like, well, let's see. I'm on 1.5 speed. Let me know, guys, if it's too fast.
Professor Dave.
Howdy.
Howdy. Thanks for coming, bro.
Yeah, happy to be here. A little surprised to be here, but happy nonetheless.
Look, man, you're very talented, and your videos are very funny.
Thank you.
And I can't deny that, whether I agree with all of the stuff you say or not. Mm-hmm. Kudos to you for doing what you're doing and making it entertaining, informative, and fucking hilarious. So for the people that are listening to this that may hate your guts because they don't agree with you, which is stupid,
right.
This will be like taking an ice bath for them. It'll be healthy, I think.
I hope they get all the way through it. Yeah.
I think it'd be good to start this off by like explaining how you got into all this shit in the beginning.
Sure. Okay, let's see. I mean, even my viewers, I don't think have like the full in-depth origin story. So I guess I can give you kind of the medium length one, and then anywhere you want more details. This is a long show, right? You can feel free to pry and get more information. I guess I would say, so I studied chemistry in college.
Okay, before we get into that, I just want to say, like, I think from what I've seen when I watched the podcast, this is the only time that Danny actually comments on Dave's content just to say he's entertaining and he's very funny. And like, don't get me wrong, like Dave, like, yeah, like the fact that like he doesn't hold his punches and he just trashes the people he debunks, like, yeah, it's entertaining as hell, but it would be nice to actually talk about like the substance of his arguments, because he's talking about like, oh, you know, people may not agree with what? Science? Because that's the core of the issue here. You know, like, I know, like, this is just a quick intro and anything, but I don't recall him, like, actually getting into any of what Dave actually says in his videos. And to me, like, that's a first red flag.
And then in grad school as well. But ultimately, all I really wanted to do was play music. So from the beginning of college, I knew I wanted to be a musician. I was playing in bands, really obsessed with that, and but decided to be a chem major anyway. Apparently, I was very practical in that regard. But then all through my 20s, I was playing in bands, and all the while, just at first, I was sort of tutoring and substitute teaching. You know, you still need to get by. You know, you need to make a living and pay the rent. So bandmates would all be bartenders or whatever. I would teach chemistry, and then I was teaching organic chemistry at this trade university for about 3.5 years. And during that time, the band I was in at that time started to kind of take off a little bit. And so we were signed to a label and touring and all this stuff. And we were touring so much that we decided we all needed some form of passive income. And so we all had our little ideas, and mine was a YouTube channel. So this is 2014. So this is quite a while ago at this point.
What kind of music?
So that band was called The Lonely Wild. I would call it like indie Americana, I guess, rock and roll.
Okay.
I mean, for like,
Okay.
yeah, it was guitar-driven rock music. I was the drummer in that band. And so in 2014, like there was educational content.
This is another thing. Like, I know Dave is a musician. This is the first time I never like saw any of his music or anything, but the fact that he said he plays the drum, like, listen, I'm a drummer too. I mean, not anymore, but in here, we're always drummer. And another way I relate to Dave personally, we're both drummer bros.
On YouTube, there was, I mean, Khan Academy started way like 07, 08 or something like that. There was Crash Course, there was some stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I can do that. So I took my organic chemistry lectures and just delivered them to camera with a whiteboard. Just, here you go, OChem 1 and 2 students, and put them online with a little bit of branding and stuff. And it was received very well. It was the first thing in my life that just was instantly, people were appreciative, and, so I had a lot of positive feedback. And so I just started to do general chemistry tutorials with green screen and animations and things like that. And so eventually around mid 2016, it looked like the band wasn't really going to pan out, which was devastating. But the channel was starting to, it had, maybe 10, 20,000 subscribers or something. It was enough to kind of go, all right, well, what if I put all my eggs in this basket? So for the next 4 or 5 years, I just started really relentlessly uploading educational tutorials. So high school and undergrad aligned, curriculum aligned stuff. I moved on to like biochemistry, biology, physics, astronomy, math.
He drops information to people, says, yeah, good one. Well,
sort of whatever I had studied, whatever was tangential to what I had studied, and continue doing that. And then the reason I'm probably here is that around 2019, 2020, I pivoted into, not really pivoted, but in addition to the tutorials, which I still generate, I started making debunking content where I sort of go after charlatans in the science space who are lying about science for whatever financial or political motivation, and I just make content sort of exposing and eviscerating them, and that has definitely gained me more, no, I mean, not necessarily more notoriety. I guess it depends. If you're in a chemistry department at a university, they're probably talking about my tutorials, but for the broader general public, I'm certainly better known for my debunking content. So
Yeah. Very, very entertaining shit, dude. And are you familiar with CoffeeZilla?
yes.
He's great. He's similar. He calls out sort of like more of the actual like financial fraud that happens with like a lot of the big influencers, like a lot of the crypto bullshit and a lot of like the I don't know. He did a bunch of stuff on Patrick Bet-David, Grant Cardone, recently like Logan Paul and some of the people. I don't keep up with all of it.
Yes.
But he does really good work too. We talked to him like years ago. But recently I watched one of your videos on like on ancient Egypt. I think it was about Jimmy Corsetti. I like Jimmy. He's always been pleasant to me. I get along with him. Like if this was about any of my friends, I would laugh my ass off about it. It was very entertaining. And I could.
Okay, again, like I think I know which video he's talking about. I do remember seeing a video from Dave, like on ancient Egypt and whatever. And again, not actually talking about the substance. Your video was very funny.
Couldn't help but like share it with a bunch of my friends. Like, dude, have you seen this? Like, it's great. Like, even though like I don't think the pyramids were tombs, this guy's great. Like, this guy's funny, and I think there needs to be people that are like this that are out there, because like I don't think that you should be, even though the way it is everyone's kind of like siloed into their own ideological bubbles on the internet, which is kind of like what the algorithms have done. It's kind of like siloed people away for whatever algorithmic reason, to get more engagement on stuff or to monetize it better. Who knows why? But that has been the byproduct.
It's
of it.
pretty easy to wrap your head around. I mean, the sensationalist content is rewarded, so you end up getting audience capture. And so I mean that's why I was reticent to come, but ultimately decided it was a good idea, because it sounds like you're trying to not necessarily follow the Joe Rogan path of just exclusively platforming grifters because of the revenue that it brings. People want to see this stuff. And Jimmy's nice to you because he wants access to your platform, but he's a very toxic individual. And that whole cult, the pseudo-archaeology cult, which you've platformed a bit, Joe Rogan platforms endlessly. It's an extremely toxic cult. And I'm sure your listeners that have watched all these guys on your show and other shows don't want to hear that, but it's absolutely the case. And I've made videos on Graham and his underlings and all of these other people. I'm starting to move on to other figures because those are not as relevant anymore. And there's other people that are kind of cropping up in this space. And it's just sensationalist clickbait content. Anti-establishment archaeologists are all idiots, and they don't know this like super special secret truth that I'm offering you. It's tantalizing. It's a tantalizing narrative, but it's...
Well, I think everything could be classified as...
And this is the thing that's like, what Dave is really emphasizing here is that, okay, like, yeah, sure, there's a lot of people talking about a lot of different stuff, but some of them are just straight up wrong. Their information is misleading to the point that it can sometimes be harmful, because it discourages people from actually learning the real history, because they get sucked into these narratives. This guy, Danny Jones, is just like, oh, well, like, he's really nice, like, I like him, like, he's a cool guy and whatever. It's like, okay, you can think whatever you want of him interpersonally, but his content is trash, because it's completely wrong. And at the end of the day, that's where the main focus should be. You shouldn't just be having people on to just talk because you want to talk. Oh, yeah, bro, like, let's talk about your content and stuff like that. It's like, when are we holding people actually accountable for what they're talking about? Why are you so interested in that stuff? Why is it that Dave made a whole video explaining how this guy's content is completely fake, and you don't actually have anything to say about the merits of the content itself. You're talking about the vibe. Oh yeah, it was very entertaining. It was so funny, man. Okay, what about the claims? What does his claim and the fact that they are totally misleading say about the guy? Do you want to get into that? Wouldn't that be interesting? What if he actually bothers with it,
Secret truth that I'm offering. It's tantalizing. It's a tantalizing narrative, but it's...
Well, I think everything could be classified as a cult online. There's a lot of things.
But this is such a redundant way of looking at it. Oh yeah, everything's a cult online. Everything is divisive. Yeah, a lot of things are divisive online, sure, but can we focus on the facts? Like, if you have that perspective that everything is a cult, that everything is so divisive now, and you want to be above it, then ditch all of it and stick to the facts. That's all you gotta do. But he's all about the vibes,
Political parties are absolute cults. Different segments of
even this
cult
that I'm offering. It's tantalizing. It's a tantalizing narrative.
Like, listen to this.
I think everything could be classified as a cult online. There's a lot of things. Both political parties are absolute cults.
So we're on the enlightened centrist too. Like, both parties are cults. Dude has no idea what's going on, like, on the side of the Democrats. Like, how there's, like, a massive shift towards the left versus, like, the corporate Democrats and all of that stuff. Like, you can look at all the MAGA Trumpists, and they will defend all the most nonsensical stuff that Trump says, while the Democrats are actually mad that their representatives are not listening to them. Like, you can't call it a cult in the way that you would call MAGA a cult. This is just extremely redundant. And when you have such a redundant worldview of everything, like, where does that lead you? Ugh. I mean, I understand that, like, the video barely started and I have a lot of commentary, but it's like, those are all the things I was thinking as I was watching it the first time last weekend.
Different segments of religious knowledge or religions or cults, basically.
Sure.
And these things have become religions where I don't think it's everyone, man. I think most people are genuinely interested in this stuff, but the people that you see tweeting about it, the loudest people online are, I agree with you, the most toxic people. And then when you see people like that, you automatically want to lump everyone into it and say, this is this big toxic cult. When in reality, it's a handful of people that are very loud online trying to get engagement.
Sure. But that's, I mean, we're in the heartland of Scientology, right?
We are. We got an e-meter right there. We can do a technological exorcism on you right now.
I walked around by the headquarters yesterday. I was like, this is wild.
It's insane.
But I mean, but you can say that, like, that is like the biggest and most successful cult of the past century.
It is really. Yeah. It is, right? Why like they're the one cult that's been able to survive.
They've just mastered it. But what I'm saying is that obviously there are always going to be people on the periphery, right? You're trying to lure in people on the periphery. Right? That's why all of what's been going on exposing the the Church of Scientology is incredible, and I can't believe they're still able to operate after what's come out. But this is what you do, right? With all of these nascent cults, you have these cult leaders, and they're trying to draw in people from the periphery. Saying, this is reasonable. This is how we, and so that's why there's not enough people making debunking content. So there's too many of these, and there has to be enough content, or a roughly equal amount of content debunking these claims as there are the people that are generating them. So
yeah, I just think this all probably started as far as like the ancient archaeology angle of it. I think when Joe Rogan probably had Graham Hancock on over 10 years ago,
just over and over.
I think that's kind of when the internet really exploded with this stuff. I mean, I think Joe actually has said that's like when his podcast really took off, when he had Graham Hancock on. And some of the things Graham Hancock is saying, I'm not an expert in Graham Hancock, or I have read one of his books maybe 6 years ago. I'm not I'm not the person to debate whether he's right or wrong. But I think there's a genuine.
Of course you aren't. And this is always it, like, oh, I'm not qualified, but let me question all of it anyway. If you're not qualified, how do you base your opinion? If you're not qualified, how do you reach a conclusion? At one point or another, you have to decide, like, okay, well, there is all this information, some of it contradicts each other, which seems the most convincing? And I would say, like, when it comes to Graham, whatever his name is, like, he's been on Joe Rogan multiple times, so I've heard. Dave has made a bunch of videos on him where he addresses the arguments. If you're this guy, and you've seen the stuff put out by Graham Hancock, and then you've seen someone rebut the arguments, you've seen Flynn Dibbles rebut his arguments on Joe Rogan, and you're still in that position of, well, I've heard both sides, and it's all, like, very interesting, it's all very entertaining. Like, are you thinking at all? Do you have any critical thinking? Make a decision. Make an assessment. You've heard the arguments from both sides. Which makes the most sense to you? Why are you always perpetually in this zone of, well, it's all very interesting. Some of it is wrong, some of it is correct. Why are you still here? You're only here because you're a perpetual skeptical, pseudo-intellectual contrarian. Your entire worldview is just being in that weird place that doesn't really exist, because if you actually take the time to listen to people who make critical arguments and you think about them critically, you would not stay in this nebula. You know? It wouldn't happen. You wouldn't make a decision at some point. But they never do. And that is so frustrating. It's not even agnostic. Agnostic is specifically something you would say, I think my camera froze. What the hell is going on? I haven't had that issue in a while. Agnostic is, I typically use this word specifically for like religion. You haven't seen any compelling evidence for yourself that any one religion is certain fact, you know? This is not agnostic. This is skepticism, but it's unfounded skepticism. Proper skepticism is when you hear a claim and you're like, okay, that's an interesting claim, but I would like to see what it's based on before I take it at face value. But then that implies that once you see the evidence and you see that it's convincing and that it's credible and it comes from a place of strong academic authority, then you stop being a skeptic and you just change your position. That's what real skepticism is. Selective skepticism, as the Watcher is saying, is you're skeptic for the sake of it. You're going to be skeptic of everything, and it shows a clear bias, because this guy, Danny, he is skeptic towards anything that is even remotely mainstream. And then every time something that is not mainstream, something that's already been condemned, something that's already been debunked, someone who's already lost all their credibility, presents some completely ridiculous claim, and there is info, there are videos and documentaries out there of people actually debunking what they're saying. And somehow, none of that stuff makes it true. And you're just like, oh, well, you know, it's just so interesting. You don't want to take a position on it because you know it's ridiculous. But you don't want to also say, like, this is nonsense. Everything but the one thing I believe in. Exactly. And it's the fact, like, these podcast bros, man, they just sit there and you say, like, oh, I feel like, I think, yeah, I noticed this, I noticed that. They really just want to feel smart from sitting there in a podcast format of feeling like they're having a serious conversation. And the act of doing that is what makes them feel smart, as opposed to the actual substance of what they're seeing, which is all just a big nothing burger. Even, like, you will see, as Dave actually brings the arguments, you see the moments where, like, his brain freezes and he doesn't know what to actually say, so he just moves the goalpost. Anyway, I'm going to try not to interrupt as much.
An interest in
I think
this
my point's been made.
Stuff, a genuine human interest in this stuff. And clearly academics and archaeologists and Egyptologists mostly disagree with him. Is fascinating. Whether there is.
Okay. I don't know. Oh, 10 pounds, Kenya. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry, guys. Like, for some reason, my camera is going to keep freezing at random. I'm going to try and pay attention. 10 pounds. Thank you so much, Kenya. Can you get enough subs already so we can become your slaves? I mean, members. Jokes aside, love your content and keep at it. Bit of a weird joke, but I mean, don't I have membership options? I should check. But thank you so much. I hope to grow more. But the problem with my channel is that it's very sporadic. I don't have a lot of steady content. I can barely make regular content on my main channel these days. But I have a very big video essay that has nothing to do with anything I've made so far that is coming in soon. Anywho, thank you so much. I just want you guys to listen carefully to what he says, because that basically sums up the entire conversation.
Is it And clearly, academics and archaeologists and Egyptologists mostly disagree with him. Is fascinating. Whether there is a kernel of truth to what he's saying or not, at least the guy's traveling.
Where's the critical thinking here? Okay, the guy's stuff is interesting, even though most of academia disagrees with him. It's still fascinating. It's so fascinating, isn't it? You know, like, I think the Earth is flat, and most of the scientific, pretty much the entire science community disagrees with me. But it's so fascinating that I would say that. You know, it's like it's so interesting, dude. This is the opposite of intellectualism. I'm not even talking in terms of like, well, because a lot of people disagree, that means you're wrong. It's not like a democracy. There is a reason that the entire scientific community disagrees with Graham Hancock, is because the evidence doesn't support his claims. There is a global scientific consensus on Egypt, and the only way Graham can push against it is by claiming that they're all wrong, that there is a conspiracy to censor him, and it becomes all about like the sensationalized story of him being an underdog, fighting for his historical truth, which is not a truth, it's a lie. And that's how he makes his money, by lying to people. And it's like, at some point, you have to be able to look at people and just say, like, no, they're just wrong. They are frauds. You need to stop taking them seriously. It doesn't matter if they are nice interpersonally with you. They are liars. It's the nicest thing they can think to say because they know it's BS. They know. But this brings it back to what I was saying earlier about like the scientific method and historical revisionism. The reason he can stay in that, the way he can stay in that nebulous phase that isn't really there, is because if you keep pushing him harder on it, you will start using that against the scientific community. You say, well, you know, like, it is true that Graham Hancock, like the scientific consensus doesn't agree with him, but you can never really know anything for sure in science. So technically, the scientific community is just as likely to be wrong as he is. We can't know. It's so fascinating to think about. Professor Dave himself pointed out multiple times that the idea of academia having to respect each and any idea is just, maybe unicorns exist actually, lol, you may never know. That is literally what it is. That is what I call weaponizing the scientific method against itself. You cannot ever trust vaccines because maybe in 50 years there will be a scientific discovery that confirms once and for all that they do cause autism. That's literally the logic. And it is so frustrating.
Around to all these places, saying all this stuff. Like, he's not saying this is an absolute bona fide fact.
Right.
Right.
He's a tourist peddling sensationalist claims. It's just not really an honest framing. Right. Academics don't disagree. They know that he's wrong. Right. And Graham is very careful about making very few falsifiable claims. He stays as vague as possible. And that was what was great about Flint debating.
And let me
Graham
another
on
thing.
Joe.
Another thing I'll be clear about is I kind of dissented from the norm on Joe's podcast with Flint. I thought Graham bodybagged. I thought Flint bodybagged Graham in that debate. That was my, because there's this phenomenon I'm sure you're aware of when you watch things online.
So he bodybagged him, but you still think it's fascinating. You still think it's interesting. Could you say, Danny, whether Graham is completely wrong? Or did you just hear all those arguments? Like, oh, it's so fascinating.
Gaslight yourself by reading the comments, because the comments sort of like have their own sort of conclusion they come to, and then some people even read the comments first and be like, oh, this must be what it's about. Then you watch the video in that context.
Hence bot campaigns, because they know that if they can shift the optics in the comment section, that might lead people to not even watch the content at all, or
right.
Well.
So I thought that was a great debate to see. I really learned a lot from it, and I thought Flint actually did a good job, as insufferable as some people think he may be. I personally liked him.
I don't like what's insufferable about providing a mountain of facts and empirical evidence to disprove a grifting
he's
fraud,
very toxic online. He's kind of, he's just as loud as Jimmy.
There is nothing more toxic to me than people like this. Because again, like, oh, he bodybagged Hancock, but I find him like so rude online. I find him so toxic that this is why, like, oh my gosh, like, he was so rude. Can't he just like respond to his stuff respectfully? He did. He did on the Joe Rogan podcast. He just disproved everything. You saw him disprove everything, and you still can't have a firm position. Why does thinking for yourself mean never having a firm position? Why? Hello, May. I think that's May. You keep changing your name. Emailing? The scientific community can be wrong, but the one group that proves their wrongness is the scientific community. Not even necessarily, to be clear. There could be the one thing that we have to keep in mind, this is what I was talking about at the beginning, is that anybody technically could disprove the scientific community, but that means disproving the consensus. That is going to be very difficult without some groundbreaking evidence. So technically it's possible, but it's very unlikely, essentially. That's really what we have to keep in mind. So in that sense, it is most likely going to be the scientific community itself debunking the scientific community. But again, what this leads to, this process of whether it's historical revisionism or just a scientific method, people will use that fact to say, well, the science disproves itself all the time, so we can never trust it. The saddest thing is that Flint is generally the nicest guy you'll see responding to pseudoscience. Yeah, from what little I've seen from him, he's way more polite than Dave. Dave, I saw his reaction to Dr. Mike's on Jubilee, and someone said in the comments that basically Professor Dave is Dr. Mike's anger translator, which makes so much sense. Someone outside the scientific community proving the scientific community wrong becomes a part of the scientific community. Exactly, there's that too. They become part of it, you know, like, I will need some proper, like, historical precedent, but it happens all the time. Sometimes it's just like introducing new things that the scientific community was not aware of, and you don't just debunk it, you become like a pillar of the scientific community. You become like this huge influence. It happens. That's why I know you tell the truth, Duke. You talk so nice. I have my moments. I'm already getting pissed at this guy. But I mean, I am sincere in what I believe, that's for sure. These people should also know that the argument of, oh, but it's interesting and fun fails when their viewers buy the shit at face value and can't differentiate between dumb thoughts and reality. That's also true. This is why I say, like, it's important at some point to take firm positions. Even the scientific consensus, even as you acknowledge that the scientific consensus is always subject to change, the reason you side with the scientific consensus is because it's the best tools we have. So you rely on it, you defer to the scientific community for the most accurate information, but you also acknowledge responsibly that anything in it is up to change, but it will only change when concrete evidence proves it to be wrong. And that is a whole process of its own. Alfred Wigner and Continental Drift is probably the best example of this. I would love to look into it. I don't know that one. As the above suggests, he proposed the theory of continental drift and the supercontinent of Pangaea. He was a mere meteorologist meddling in the field of geologists. Again, things like that can happen. But that's the point. You can disprove certain things, but it needs to happen thoroughly. You know, there is a process that goes behind it. There are a lot of tools that they use to measure everything, and that's the process. The reason Graham and Khan got bodied, as Danny just said on the Joe Rogan podcast by Flint, is because Flint has the evidence. So once you see him get bodied, and you see the more compelling evidence, you see the ways in which the guy is wrong, take a position. Stop pretending like it's still all nebulous. My goodness. My girlfriend says I'm repeating myself a lot. I'm so sorry, guys. Let's continue.
but in the complete opposite direction.
Yeah, but these are people who have, encouraged people to contact his place of work and try to get him fired. And like, there's just, after that debate began this entire narrative of Flint is a liar, Flint is a liar. Joe said it on his show, had Graham on a bunch more times to talk about what a liar Flint is, and then all the other underlings, repeating this narrative. It's just damage control. He humiliated Graham on Joe's show. That's what happened. You know what I mean? He just brought all that he got Graham to admit that there's no evidence for anything he says, and then he also brought empirical evidence against the existence of agriculture and all this stuff, and even got him to walk back and say, well, maybe it was just the idea of agriculture, which is meaningless, right? He exposed how vapid these narratives really are. And Graham's very clever. He doesn't make that many falsifiable claims, but ultimately it's just whimsy, right? Dressed up as this bold anti-establishment research that flies in the face of, it's nuts. It's just a grifter.
Yeah, one of the things that I've said before that I've thought about a lot, I was thinking about this a lot during that time when he did that podcast and before I had Flint on the show, is that when you are in that position that Graham Hancock was in the beginning, where you are sort of like the fringe outlier, anti-establishment person, you feel like everyone's coming to get you, everyone's trying to take you down, and you're kind of the one shining light in this sea of darkness, right? You can go so far, you can come full circle to being like the very thing that you were fighting against in the beginning, to where now everyone is the enemy. Yeah,
but a figure like Graham never truly was that.
He's just completely buying into the narrative. Completely buying into Hancock's narrative. Oh, he's the outlier. He's the underdog. Everyone is going against him. The reason he relates to Hancock so deeply is because that makes Hancock a contrarian. And he himself thinks of himself as like an intellectual contrarian. Jesus Christ. Do you secretly make your water bottle any slightly larger? No, man, it's the same. But I did just fill it up. It's like 4 liters. But one of the best gifts my girlfriend ever given me for Christmas a couple of years ago. And I did fill it up right before the stream. But my God, this is so bad. But anyway, I want to keep going because there's multiple topics.
It's an alluring narrative. Everyone wants Luke Skywalker versus the Death Star, right? That is the only way to get people to discredit an entire field of science with millions of experts that actually know what they're talking about, right? It has to have that bite to it. So Graham has always been a grifter. I mean, he started with like really ancient aliens on Mars kind of stuff, and then he kind of pulled it back to sound as reasonable as possible, to kind of lure people in. Look, he speaks very well, and he has these interesting ideas, and he's not arrogant. He says, "What if?" But it's just all of it is absolutely baseless rhetoric to sell books. That's all it is.
Do you think that people like him literally get into this stuff just to profit on it? Like say, hey, let's take this lie and let's just deceive people to make money? Or do you think that they're actually maybe interested in it and they believe that it could be true and they want to discuss? I mean, obviously, I think there's nuance. Yeah. I think there are people that do what I just described.
Right.
But
Billy Carson or
yeah.
But it's the same narrative. He's just way more sensational with it, with the Anunnaki and Emerald Tablets and all that stuff. It's
Billy?
It's the same grift. Graham just
Yes, Kane, yeah. I'm special as an ideology. That is literally it. They feel special for being contrarian. I feel like these are the guys who would have read like one Wikipedia page on ancient Greek philosophy, and they would think to themselves that the way to do philosophy right is to purposely question everything. As I understand it, that was never the point of philosophy. Philosophy is to get to the truth, like anything else. It's a process of critical thinking. It is meant to get you to think about things, but you're also supposed to use it to come to a rationale. You're supposed to use it and use its logic to arrive at a conclusion eventually. But these guys, they're like, oh, you're supposed to ask what a chair is forever. That's what's so based. That's what makes me a genius. I'm so special.
Tries to appear as reasonable as possible. Now, the degree to which you want to get into human psychology and how much a grifter is able to like convince themselves that they are the hero that they present themselves as, I don't know. And it varies on a case by case basis.
Well, here's the thing about Graham, and without drilling down into too much detail,
he keeps going on Graham. And it's so funny that Dave just keeps saying, like, yeah, he's a grifter. He doesn't actually believe the stuff he's saying. He's being sensationalist, and he's very much tailored his language in specific ways to be as appealing to people as possible. But when you get down to the facts, as he did with Flindable, you realize immediately that he's completely wrong on everything, and that should end it. He says all of those things, and for Danny, it just flies over his head, and he just keeps bringing it up, as if the narrative hasn't just been addressed. He doesn't respond to anything Dave is saying. It's so dumb. Big Astronomy doesn't want you to know the universe is such.
Like, it's absolutely possible that human beings are a lot older than established science says right now, because the age keeps getting older. Like, I've talked about this ad nauseum. We talked about it yesterday or 2 days ago, whatever the last podcast was.
Literally, like, yeah, it's possible We see new evidence every day, but again, you should still base your views on the current evidence that we do have, not the speculation that more evidence should come later. You only change your view when new evidence is introduced and it's shown to be credible. But you should still rely on the consensus. And all he's saying here is, well, because it changes all the time, we can never trust it. That's, again, I wonder how many grifters started to believe their crap at the end. He talks like a politician, but politicians don't slip up and reveal their leanings this easily. Clearly not.
The human skull found in China that is dated back to over 1 million years old. Like, their evidence keeps coming out that humans were on this planet for starting out way earlier than we originally thought. 1 million-year-old human skull, Unixon 2, discovered in Hubei, China in the 1990s, has been digitally reconstructed. Oh, this was found that long ago.
Okay, but
so like there's like it's.
But you realize that like hominid species have been around for millions of years. That doesn't
Hominids,
make
but this
them
is Homo
Homo
sapien.
sapiens.
This was a human. This was a Homo sapien human, not a hominid.
This is not the Homo sapien. It says right here. Homo longi. I don't even know what that is, but it's not Homo sapien.
The Homo, is that longi? Denisovans.
This isn't. Is this the article, Steve, that we were talking about? I thought the article was more recent. Yeah, there it is. There's the BBC article. That was from 2025. So read the first paragraph of this. Let's see what it says. A million-year-old human skull found in China suggests that our species Homo sapiens began to emerge at least 500,000 years earlier than we thought. Researchers are claiming in a new study. Where's the new study? What does it say about the new study? The discovery published in the leading scientific journal Science shocked the research team, which included scientists from a university in China and the UK's Natural History Museum. So it's a real study published in a scientific journal of a Homo sapien skull that's 1 million years old. So like I don't see why it's controversial to be open to the possibility that humans could be way older than we thought, right? Like, sure. Science evolves all the time.
But
right?
there's a huge difference between finding a Homo sapiens specimen that's earlier than you thought, right? What is it? Jebel Hood is 300,000. That was my impression of how Homo sapiens is.
Mm-hmm.
But that in no way signifies that there was some kind of hyper advanced structure or civilization or all of these other very outrageous claims, right? We know that hominids have been around for millions of years,
right.
Different species. So
right.
Homo sapiens emerging earlier than we thought. Okay, I mean, I'm open to it. I don't know, I haven't seen that, but
Yeah.
that doesn't in any way
But
substantiate.
you see, this is the same thing I was talking about like earlier when I was describing like historical revisionism. Okay, you just found a skull that is significantly older than anything you've had so far, and that gives you like a new piece of history. But that piece of history still only serves its own evidence. Okay, it shows that humans, Homo sapiens, could have been a thing much earlier than we anticipated based on that one skull. Okay, that's not in of itself evidence that there was an advanced civilization before. It's not in of itself evidence that aliens built the pyramids. That just shows we could have been there earlier. That's it. But this guy will use this to say, well, this disproves what the science said before. Therefore, everything else that science says, including the idea that, the pyramids could not possibly have been built by a more advanced civilization, that is also probably wrong. We just don't know yet. Well, their philosophizing is just questioning everything and deconstructing without any goal in mind, just questioning for the sake of it. Yes, they feel smart by being in this, like I said, nebulous state of like questioning everything, even though there's always evidence like right in your face that you should be taking at face value. But they just reject it out of sheer skepticism. It's just a vibe.
Outrageous pseudo-archaeological claims.
Right. And when it comes to like some of the ancient structures that Graham talks about, like the ones in Indonesia, Turkey, Egypt, and even in the UK.
Yeah, I'm tired of this topic. Let's move on. Oh, this is so funny because they start talking about like alternative medicine. Like all the supplements industry that is not regulated whatsoever. And guess what? This is what this guy sells in his ads. Let me see here. Yeah, 8 ingredients in one powerful formula, clinically dosed plus effective. This guy is so skeptical of the science. Gee, I wonder why. He's got like a bunch of ads throughout his podcast, and it's all stuff like this. Ridiculous. Even if they found an old flying saucer buried somewhere in the world, almost all of human history would remain the same. Exactly. You would not have evidence of laser guns. You would not have evidence of super advanced stuff anywhere. At best, you would have a flying saucer that is there, and that's it. One of the things that, as a quick anecdote here, Because I was talking last year, I had like a conversation with Trill Black, who is mostly into Black history and the broader, they call them the Afrocentric community. The first time I saw this kind of content was years ago, and I remember it being about like traces of Black people in Asia. And one of the claims the video made is it said that like somewhere in Japan there are pyramid foundations which would have been built by Black people. That's what it said, and it didn't cite anything, and that was it. So I decided to look into it, and what I found, the closest thing I found that resembled that claim was that somewhere in Japan, right off the coast, underwater, there are flat stone foundations. That's it. And the only thing that people speculate that it is the foundation of a much older village from a part of the ground that fell below sea level over time. Because in Japan, like, they would have like those solid stone foundation and then like those looser structures on top because of the frequent earthquakes, so they were more flexible and easier to rebuild and stuff like that. No claim that it's a pyramid, and certainly nothing about Black people being in Japan building them. But it's so fascinating, It's so fascinating to think about. Because history is wrong all the time, that must be true. You know what I mean? Just because those foundations exist doesn't mean it changes the entire history of Japan or of civilization. You know what I mean? Even if they found a flying saucer right next to these structures, it wouldn't change anything about anything else we know. At best, you might think, oh, well, aliens at the time crashed there. But since there is no evidence or depictions of them in any history, we might figure that they were never noticed. That would be the end of it. Anyway, I don't know why I'm going to this thing. So, what's the next topic? Science versus pseudoscience. Let's go.
Science, what would be the correct word to say?
I mean, there's academic science and there's the private sector, but there's no mainstream science, right? There's science and there's pseudoscience, right?
Right.
Whoever is publishing science, whether it is academic or, whether it's in the private sector, whatever it is, right? That's actual legitimate science. And then there's people who lie about science on podcasts, right? And they refer to it
Well,
as
there's Hamilton Morris, who
mainstream
does
science
science and also does podcasts about, scientific research that he does on psychedelics and stuff like that. He's not a mainstream scientist by any meaning of that word.
Sure, that's fair. He synthesizes chemicals. That's totally fine. You can do that. He's an interesting case, so like a hobbyist turned, scientist. Right. But he's not pushing any super outrageous claims. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think where it gets swirly is when you have science and you have academic institutions and you have that are all intertwined with governments, and then you have financial entanglements with all of that stuff. There's financial entanglements in every single aspect of science, whether it be climate science, whether it be vaccine science, or pharmaceutical companies, and but that's even like geopolitics type stuff. Like there's money and there's weird little financial incentives entwined into all of that stuff, and that's where it gets squirrely, and that's where it gets hard to figure out what the truth is.
But that can also be used. Number one, that can be used as a scapegoat, right? Blah 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 in the pocket of big pharma. You just say that, and people.
Yes, and that's exactly what that guy just did. He is using the fact that sometimes there's government funds, sometimes there's the private sector, sometimes it's the academia. Like, he's putting all of them into a whirl to say, like, none of it can be trusted ever because look at all this shady stuff going on.
Believe you. But number two, financial entanglements for the frauds that are pushing these narratives, right? They make money off of this stuff. So,
sure, people can make money off of questioning power if they have a podcast or they're selling advertising. I mean, selling books maybe.
This idea that it's not.
Look how he just framed this. Literally saying like, oh, like these scientists, they make a lot of money. That can create an incentive to do like shady stuff. And Dave says, oh, well, who makes a lot of money? The grifters who spew a whole bunch of nonsense. And you see the guy like for a second. Like, look at his face. He has no idea how to respond to that, so he immediately frames it differently. Literally just to defend their own narrative. What does he say exactly?
These narratives, right? They make money off of this stuff. So,
sure, people can make money off of questioning power.
Questioning power. So again, the little scientist in a Pfizer lab that's being paid like a crappy wage while the patent he develops gets kept by Pfizer, he's in power. And so if Hancock or RFK or any of these idiots, make money from questioning the science, well, they're not just, being immoral with it. They are questioning power. They are fighting the dictators. The guy can't even, fathom the notion that these guys could be grifters. He immediately framed it differently. Their actual issue is capitalism. Yes. That's one of the things that's going to be very recurrent here without being actually said.
If they have a podcast or they're selling advertising, selling books maybe.
This idea that a scientist is in this incredible position of power or is doing something incredibly lucrative, the vast majority of scientists are not paid that well, right? They're just doing what they're doing because they love to do science and discover things, right? So it's this...
And keep in mind, yes, Dave is a science communicator. He doesn't do any of the science himself, right? Most scientists don't have, a public presence at all. They're just working a 9 to 5. And, like he said, they're not paid that well. And they're just doing what they can, and they're making ends meet, and their only job is to advance the science as best they can based on their own fields of expertise. For the vast majority of scientists, that's the reality of their day-to-day living. And they've been vilified so thoroughly. It's insane.
This way of painting the scientific community as this cabal, that's beholden to blah, 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 whatever. It's a global scientific community operating in academia, in the private sector, under many different countries, many different, political apparatus.
Yeah.
There's no way to, that is why the consensus of the global scientific community is what you go by at all times, right? Anything that is contradicting the global scientific consensus, that's what you want to be skeptical about. Because can you get one scientist to lie? Absolutely you can. Andrew Wakefield, or a doctor.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
Sure.
I want to make sure I'm clear on this. You think anyone who is questioning or skeptical of the global
contradicting,
of the global consensus.
The global scientific consensus, yeah.
What about that person? You should
be very skeptical of that person, right? You should. They are making claims that contradict the entire body of scientific knowledge. It doesn't 100% guarantee that they're wrong, but they're very unlikely to be right, and especially if they're not scientists themselves, they're almost certainly not right. So you can take someone's claims and go, all right, well, all of the science says no, but all right, say your thing, and 99% of the time they're trivially debunkable. Sometimes it's a little harder to debunk. You have to really dig into it, but the idea that you can you have scientists all over the world. There's no way to buy off millions of scientists in different countries, all these things. It doesn't make sense economically, right? You can buy off one scientist, maybe a handful, so you can get papers that are,
And keep in mind also, this is the other thing that makes it really clear how there's no real real critical thinking of it, because this guy, Danny Jones, he will question the entire scientific community except all the scientists who get rejected and start making claims that challenge the global consensus. If someone says they're a scientist and they push and the arguments they make reflect the global consensus, he will say, oh, well, you're part of big pharma, you're part of big science, you're part of big academia, I can trust you. If someone says, I'm a scientist and the global consensus is wrong, you'll be like, oh, I like that guy, he's so interesting, this is so fascinating. I have to now... And the thing is, he will actually use the fact that they used to be scientists to appeal to authority in a sense. So he will not trust any scientist as long as they align with the global consensus. But if they don't align with it, and they are scientists, the fact that they're a scientist will be used to reinforce the argument. That's why it's so fake. It's so ridiculous. Scientists need to apply for grants. Meanwhile, people like Andrew Wakefield live in mansions. There's that too. I would like to know what this guy thinks of Andrew Wakefield. Do they ever talk about it? I have no idea.
Bought off by special interests. But ultimately, these are, when you talk about climate science and things like that, this is the fossil fuel industry that's trying to manufacture this stuff, right? So again, it's pretty easy to spot the motives with things like that, Then with individual grifters, it could be anything, right? Somebody's just trying to make a buck however they can, But
so journalism, by definition, is being skeptical of power and being skeptical of the people in charge who are controlling things. That is the very definition of journalism, and it is.
Being a journalist means reporting the news as factually as possible. Sure, sometimes that means questioning the narrative. But that's not the whole thing. He's literally making it seem to be like being a journalist is being skeptical of anyone in power. No, it's about reporting the news. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Journalism is the activity of gathering, assessing, creating, and presenting news and information to the public. It involves researching information, verifying facts, providing necessary context, and distributing reports across various media platforms to inform society. That does not mean being perpetually skeptic. When you verify the information and the information is shown to be correct, that's what you present. Even if the information, he makes it as if like if the information came from the government and then you verify it and you see it's true, you should still be skeptical of what the government is saying, even though the information is true. Like that's podcast bros, man. They're like in a whole other dimension.
Is it so? Are you holding the people in power as your North Star of truth? Are you like defending?
Scientists are not in tremendous positions of power.
Right.
They're just people doing a job. Right. And so this thread starts to evaporate when you say, well, this government made the scientists do the thing, whatever. Okay,
right.
Well, which government? We got these vaccine studies. This one's from Sweden. This one's from China. This one's from Argentina. This one's from, like, which government? What are you talking about? The global, like the Illuminati government? Like, what are you
about
saying?
Grants, scientific grants for that scientists? One of the biggest ways scientists get funded is by grants from pharmaceutical companies. And I mean, we've had multiple in here. We had one in here maybe 2 weeks ago.
Again, he's not actually listening or addressing anything that Dave just said. Because now he's bringing up the fact that, like, okay, like you have like these private big pharma corporations in the States giving grants to scientists to research specific things that align with their financial interests, right? That's fair. But Dave just said there are, if you have a study that comes from Sweden, where big pharma over there is largely nationalized, and it comes from the government, and it's paid by taxes, that private interest dissipates completely. Like you said, the Watcher, their actual issue is capitalism. He's bringing it back to capitalism, but he's unable to say it's capitalism. And what Dave is saying is, okay, well, which government? Like, because these other governments, they have so many different ways of handling these grants. They handle their economies differently. And for the scientists, that translates into different forms of incentives. Sometimes they're paid to make profit for a company. Sometimes they're funded by the government to just do actual research. And that changes drastically the different conflicts of interest that you could see. But if at the end of the day, regardless of the dynamic at play, all the countries are coming to the same scientific conclusion, that means either A, that the science is solid, and that's why they're all coming to the same conclusions, or as Dave said, you would have to fall into conspiracy theories. It's the big Illuminati, it's the Rothschilds, it's them controlling everything. You can only go that way if you don't rely on the scientific consensus. That's the only way to go. So either you're conspiracy-brained, or you accept the reality of the situation, or you refuse to do either, like this guy, and you become like this enlightened skeptic, you know?
Most recent one who was he was a neuroscientist working in Montreal, Canada, if I remember correctly, and it was in the 90s.
Oh, and it's one of those things, he does that often, like, oh, you know, well, how about like this one time I heard of this one scientist who did this one thing, and then he was censored for it, and, you know, like, hey, everything has been disproven, blah, blah, blah. It's like, dude, the scientific consensus is what it is. If the individual people you know were proven wrong and then had a meltdown over it, that doesn't mean they had any point, because their scientific data has been evaluated by others and it's been disproven. That's the end of the story.
I think it was 1994. He got a grant from Pfizer to test a neurotransmitter, some sort of drug for Alzheimer's, and he was testing the neurotransmitters. He was using PET scans to detect the chemical reaction in the brain to this drug to see if it was effective or whatever. And in the grant agreement, he had to sign off that if the results were negative, he could not publish them. He could not make them public. The results were overwhelmingly negative. The drug was not effective at all for Alzheimer's. It wasn't reacting. I think it was acetylcholine is what the proxy was he was looking for, to see if it was reactive to this drug. And it wasn't. He asked if he could publish it. They said, no, you actually signed the documents agreeing that you wouldn't do it legally, so you're legally bound to not publish this. And they ended up bringing that drug to market. And it probably made, who knows, billions of dollars. But like the point is, these pharmaceutical companies they spend.
I'd have to look into that though, because drugs don't get approved all the time, right? You have you have independent institutions that are running clinical trials, and drugs don't get approved all the time. So this narrative that pharma is just like every drug I want will go to market no matter how harmful. It's just, and I don't know the individual study that you're talking about.
I agree with you. That's probably not true. But would you agree that it does happen?
I'm not sure. I mean, you'd have to give me an individual. I mean, you just did, but I'd have to look into it. I'd have to see whether this is just a story or what it is, because this is part of the reason that it's so disastrous what's happening under this administration, right? Under the guise of protecting public health, you just have RFK just firing half of everybody at FDA, CDC, all these institutions, and all of these deregulations, right? It's actually the precise opposite of what he pretends to stand for, right? These institutions are there to protect us from the private sector, and famously have, right? Thalidomide wasn't approved in America because the FDA wouldn't approve it. This kind of stuff. That's what these institutions are for. So, what would a pharma company do? I mean, first of all, opening itself up to all these lawsuits. So it's not like
they've been fucked by lawsuits.
Sure,
historically.
It happens. I mean, and so it's
there's more lawsuits against pharma. There's more money in settlements from pharmaceutical companies than any other industry, I think, on the face of in the history of humanity.
Possibly, and if well deserved, then great. But this painting of pharma as this unbelievable boogeyman with all the money in the world, right? Do you know that the alt health industry is significantly larger than the pharma industry?
The alt health
untested, unregulated supplement industry, right?
No.
Yeah, it's $1 trillion industry.
It makes more money than a pharmaceutical company.
More money than pharma. Yes.
You got to find this, Steve. Yeah. I do know that it takes, and I've had multiple.
Yeah, and again, this is the unregulated supplements. That's what this guy sells for like 5 ads per show.
People like scientists, drug researchers on here that have had grants from pharmaceutical companies tell me that it takes between like $10 to $12 million, 10 to 12 years to develop a drug with all the testing on rodents and all that stuff.
It's very stringent.
And it can cost $1 billion.
Yes, and only 1 in 10 drugs make it to market.
Right, so they have a huge financial incentive to push those drugs out and to get those drugs out there in the marketplace. And famously, there's billions and trillions of dollars of settlements from these pharmaceutical companies having to pay people out for killing people, injuring people, lying to people with their marketing, malpractice. I mean, I don't have to look. You don't have to look any farther than the opioid crisis. So, I mean, my point is like to default to have that be your default.
This is the point where I would be a little more critical of Dave. Like, I understand that like he's on the spot and like he's trying to keep the conversation going or whatever. But to me, having debated people like that, like I said earlier, people who are just like perpetual skeptics, I would love if we could cut through all of these nonsensical arguments and just try and get straight to the root of the issue where it's the most constructive. Because again, this guy is right now using like all the big pharma corporations getting sued for the drugs that they put on the market that harmed a lot of people, and that's certainly true. But that's not a criticism of the science. It's a criticism of the market incentive. It's a criticism of capitalism. And this is why you couldn't talk about like what's going on in other countries where their science communities are nationalized, because over there these problems don't actually exist. The same way that the private health insurance and all the horrendous things it does in the States is unique to the States. The moment you take capitalism out of it, a lot of the problems that you have just disappear. And I mean, because like, to be honest, guys, I don't think we're going to make it through like the entire podcast. I mean, we barely did at this point. We're only like 30 minutes in and I skipped some sections and it's already been like close to 1 hour and 20 minutes. The one thing I will say, like, I was so glad when I was finally able to make that point to my girlfriend, because my girlfriend, like, she's not very political at all. She tends to lean left most of the time, but she doesn't really care about politics. She's got more pressing matters in her life. But she does sometimes fall for this sort of skepticism, everything that has to do with like processed food, excessive amount of sugar, stuff like that. The only reason she never takes it like much further than a lot of like conspiracy theories do is because, for one, like, I'm here and I and I tend to disprove whatever things she gets exposed to. When it does happen, I tend to correct it immediately. But at the same time, it's because like she doesn't actually care enough about it to actually dig deeper into it. But one of the conversations we've had recently where like I finally got her to understand and I was so happy was with lab grown meat. Speaking of which, she's calling me right now. Hold up, guys. Yeah, as you're saying, Gutlab, lab grown seems okay to me as long as they get the hang of it. I think, I even have like a friend from work who's a vegan who told me the reason he's vegan is primarily because like the meat industry of just how unethical it is and the cruelty to animals and stuff like that. Like that's why he doesn't. But he said he was actually very interested in the concept of lab grown meat because he sees it as a viable ethical pathway to eating meat. And it's also like, like there's so many good things about it, like the energy, the resources it takes to grow a pound of lab grown meat as opposed to a pound of beef, which means growing a cow for years, feeding it, having it take a dump in the field every day. You know what I mean? It's lab grown meat could be like a very viable solution for as an alternative to meat, right? Now, the reason I bring this up is because my girlfriend, every time she hears the term lab-grown meat, she gets extremely skeptical of it. Oh, like chemicals, all the stuff they're going to put in there. I don't trust any of it. And I got her to understand that, like, this is a skepticism I share, but the reason I share that skepticism is because, like, the one documentary I saw on lab-grown meat, it was a doctor who invested his own savings into starting a lab-grown meat lab of sorts, and like he's trying to get it going. And what that tells me is this is still lab-grown meat within a capitalist framework. What is stopping a private company doing lab-grown meat from putting stuff in that meat that doesn't actually need to be there at all? The same way that Kellogg's would put an insane amount of sugar in their cereal to keep people addicted. The same way that the tobacco industry puts a lot of nicotine, even though it's not necessary at all. This is the same issue you're going to have with lab-grown meat. And even if they can produce it for much cheaper, if they build a monopoly and they basically destroy the regular meat industry and basically all the meat you get now is lab-grown meat, do you think the cost would be cheaper now that they have a monopoly on it? No, they would just make it more expensive. Since their cost is lower, they would just like rack up even more profits. You know what I mean? The real problem with lab-grown meat is not lab-grown meat. It's capitalism. It's still capitalism. The same way that cars can have a lot of utility, but the reason Mercedes is making you pay a monthly subscription for the seat warmer, that's capitalism. There's no reason for that other than capitalism. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. And this is the problem you're going to have like here, again, and again. All of his skepticism comes down to capitalism, but he's a capitalist, so he doesn't want to acknowledge that part. Every argument he has is specifically designed to keep him in that nebulous state of never trust anything except all the frauds. And the frauds, you never say openly you trust them because you know it's frowned upon, you know they're not actually serious, but you feel smarter about finding it all fascinating. Again, this is them thinking that philosophy is questioning everything forever when it's about constructing a framework to arrive at conclusions. You know? You never thought of that? Well, this is what I'm talking about. Like, if you had like a country like Norway who nationalized a lab-grown meat industry, and it was done by the government for the mere purpose of feeding the population with affordable food that is actually healthier all around than regular meat. Because keep in mind, another thing about meat, actual meat, is that it has bacteria and parasites in it. When you do it lab grown in a sterilized environment, you don't need pesticides, you don't need any chemicals to purge the meat of all of its bacteria and all the other stuff it has. So it's actually healthier. There's less health risks with lab grown meat. And if it was done by the government, the goal would not be to run a profit, the goal would be to feed the population. So it's an expense, not an investment. And that would change the entire game of how it's actually being done. You know, that's what I'm talking about. The reason I brought up the lab-grown meat is ultimately because I got my girlfriend to basically say like, oh, so basically the reason lab-grown meat is bad isn't because it's bad, it's because of capitalism. The first time I heard my girlfriend say like, that the problem would be capitalism. And in my mind, I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe I got her to say that.
These folk will simply blame them, the globalist elite, or whatever, without a hint of IQ. The capitalist system is so ingrained, it simply can't be wrong. As PragerU said, we can only fail capitalism. Jesus Christ.
To want to protect or to fight for those people. You know, you like to want to be the bulldog that's attacking people who are attacking those billionaires and those trillion-dollar companies who are literally only looking out for their bottom line. And, you know, they don't give a fuck about a middle-class person who can't afford a really fancy doctor who just has to go to their checkups every 6 months or whatever and has to do the bare minimum and can't afford healthy food. They have to eat out. Like, they don't give a fuck. It's the insurance companies and these pharmaceutical companies that are raking in trillions of fucking dollars, right? And they have immunity.
This is why I'm trying to...
Literally just nationalize it. This is what I would like Dave at this point to ask Danny. Okay, let's say, hypothetically, that all of it was nationalized. What's your argument then? Well, we know what his argument would be then. It would be, well, the government's going to be in control? We can't have that. You can never trust anybody, basically.
tell you about the alt health industry, right?
Yeah.
There is no real prescriptive solution that he will ever accept, basically.
They're
look at
making
this.
more money and they're peddling lies and selling complete. So everything you're saying about testing and everything, these are products that are not tested on anything. It's not labeled as medicine, so they don't have to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all these, so there's not only supplements that are actively harm people because they're not tested. They don't go through any clinical trials. There's no safeguards of any kind. So
Mm-hmm.
you want to talk about that one drug that slipped through clinical trials and some, unforeseen, not that, pharma went through the checks and balances. Here we go. We did these clinical trials and something didn't show up and somebody got harmed. Okay, well, lawsuit, great, go for it, get the money.
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking about an alt health industry. All of these products are completely untested. They do measurable harm and they pull people away from legitimate medical attention. That ivermectin would be, although that is a real drug, though ivermectin craze would be a great example of that.
So this is, what is this, Google's AI or whatever? Summing it up, the broader, this is what Google's saying, the broader global wellness industry, which includes alternative health, wellness, tourism, nutrition, and personal care, is significantly...
I love how basically that you can just turn to AI. I feel as if Dave is more of a mid-lib, unfortunately. He himself admits to not be all that into politics. I don't really care if Dave is liberal. He makes the point in that podcast. I remember him making that point that the problem with the private healthcare industry is that it's private, and that's what causes all the issues you're talking about. So I'm pretty sure Dave is in favor of universal healthcare or something like that. Of all companies they criticize, guns, food industry, and so on, they always go for pharma. Yeah, the big gun industry, never criticized. The big food industry, this is something people are going to hate me for this because I still... I'm going to risk getting canceled for this. I still listen to Vosh occasionally, okay? But it's one of those things that Vosh pointed out at one point when he was talking about RFK. He says, you will never get the people who criticize, the people who are MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, the people who are all in on RFK and are all against Big Pharma, who are all against chemicals in food and fast processed food and whatever. You will never get these people to not eat McDonald's. You could tell them, okay, well, we agree with you. We're going to heavily restrict the stuff that McDonald's can put in its food, and it's now going to taste like crap, because then these guys are going to be like, you are going to take my McDonald's away from me? Again, they don't care. They just want what they want. They're selfish. They're isolationists. They're individualists. They don't care. They don't have any real thoughts. They don't have any prescriptive ideas for how to fix the problem they're talking about. They only have skepticism. But I also watch Shapiro, John Doyle, and Sargon. Jesus Christ, dude, you're all over the place. You watch Ben Shapiro and Vosh at the same time? Damn. Dave has good values without a doubt, but he doesn't point out that capitalism is the problem conclusion often enough for my taste. Well, this is my main criticism here right now. I mean, he kind of hints at the idea that these other countries who don't have the same privatization are coming to the same conclusion as you see sometimes in the private sector. But he needs to really highlight here that this guy's problem is not with Big Pharma, it's with the private sector. He needs to hammer on that specifically. Although, to be fair, everything he said so far, while true, just flies over that guy's head anyway. So,
larger than the pharmaceutical industry. Estimates place the global wellness market at over $6 trillion, which is several times larger than the estimated 1 to 2 trillion global pharma. That's the global pharmaceutical. So this is not in the US, this is global?
Yeah. versus how many people do you know that follow a bunch of health influencers and buy the supplements?
Dude,
they
everybody I know
stuff.
has been on fucking Adderall since they were like 12,
Okay.
and they were prescribed it.
There's some oversight on that. Yeah, I mean Adderall I think was probably overprescribed in the 90s.
Yeah, I think that's a huge problem, man.
Yeah. So
Just as he says, like, like all these influencers that sell unregulated supplements, it's that guy. And so that guy just quickly pivots it to, oh, well, what about Adderall? I mean, again, I think in Dave's book, he mentions how the U.S. private sector is where innovation comes from. But that was years ago. I mean, again, there's been a lot of... There's been a lot of innovations from the private sector, to be sure. But again, the problem with the private sector is that while it might nominally encourage innovation, ultimately the goal is always the same. Maximizing profits, and so it's always going to lead to late-stage capitalism where the economy eats itself to milk as much out of it as possible, and it only drives income inequality further apart. Like, listen, the first mainstream car was the Ford T. Ford invented the modern automobile as we know it. You can go back to that car 100 years ago, the Ford T, and its fundamental aspects are still the exact same today. It's a four-wheel, it's a four-seater, running on gasoline, takes you to point A to point B, there's a bit of storage, there's an engine. It's still all the same. But now you got the Cybertruck, which is the least practical imaginable, actually dangerous in its design, and it doesn't solve any problems that the standard car model can have. It creates more problems. The same way that today you can have a fridge with Bluetooth in it for some reason, a USB plug to plug your phone in, and 5 minutes later it's going to break down because now they have planned obsolescence. Where even though you have the technology to make a fridge that'll last you 50 years, which is why your grandfather still has a fridge in their garage that they bought in 1970 that still works just fine. Nowadays, you buy a fridge, you're lucky if it lasts 10 years because it'll break down quicker. Innovation can lead to great inventions, but in a capitalist framework, it always ends up worse. It's innovating, but backwards. Yeah, it's regressing. That's the proper word. You know, I could go on and on about that. Most of my arguments for decommodifying the economy, when I'm in favor of it, comes down to this fundamental flaw of capitalism. If, for instance, I don't even really care about this. I think I made all of my points with this stream. I don't know if I'm going to go back to it. But one of the main examples of something that I would like to see decommodified is smartphones. It's the same thing here, right? Believe it or not, the first smartphone, the iPhone, came out about 20 years ago. And this is an S20. There are so many different models of phones today, right? But essentially, they all have the same functions as the first iPhone 20 years ago. It's a touchscreen, phone, text, social media, and that's about it. That's what you use a phone for. Do we really need 100 different models? And one of the biggest problems is you have companies like Apple where it's they make it impossible to replace the battery yourself. So your phone could be perfectly fine, but if the battery's defective, you can't just replace it. You need to get a whole new phone. Since phones only have a few specific features, I would be in favor of decommodifying them, or at least nationalizing them to an extent, where we have one brand that all work off more or less the same models that makes it very easy to simply replace parts on your phone over time as they get defective, as opposed to buying a whole new phone. And it would still serve the exact same purpose as the way we use it today, you know? I hate modern fart modes. I still use my iPhone 6s and I am not upgrading. And speaking of iPhones, I mean, Apple was caught years ago forcing updates on the iPhone 8 that made the battery weaker, that made it die quicker, to force people to buy new phones. How viable is this in an economy? You know what I mean? That's my point. So I think I've made my point with this idiot. No matter what Dave is saying, he always goes back to his main talking points, and his only goal is to keep everything as nebulous as possible. And I hate this guy. He is, and there's another ad. ButcherBox. You guys wanna... going to the grocery store to get your own meat is overrated, man. Why don't... Would you like to have a box to your door? That is so convenient. It's so much more convenient than just going to the grocery store like you always do for everything else. But yeah, this guy... Can I get a proper frame on him? Yeah. This guy, like... Insufferable. Complete brain rot. Again. This is really just like my main argument. Like, these people whose entire worldview is just constantly questioning the scientific consensus, using the process of the scientific community, this ever-evolving process of this making new discoveries, challenging prior notions, essentially weaponizing it against itself to say that you can never actually trust anything that's in science, and that you can basically just believe whatever you want, and then also turning around and saying any person that is from that community, from that scientific community, well, if they happen to be skeptics, if they happen to be pushing a narrative that is different, well, that makes them more interesting. And the fact that they are scientists, even though I don't trust the science, the fact that they are scientists actually gives them more credibility. I have more trust in them because they are scientists, but they just happen to be saying the stuff I like as opposed to reflecting the consensus of the scientific community. I really hate this. And this is... I've had a few conversations like this. In fact, like, if you guys... want like one video I made as like a filler video last year is this one: should everything be up for debate? In that video I break down a debate I had in a comment section, and this is basically it. Like, people who just like question, you gotta question everything, and it's just so fascinating to have all these conversations and to hear all these different points of view, the free marketplace of ideas. It's awesome. But then it's like, okay, well, what do you make of the fact that this guy you listen to has been proven to be a fraud? Oh, well, you know, it's big science, it's big climate change. Like, they're clearly just censoring him. There's some stuff shady going on. So I'm gonna keep like thinking they're interesting and stuff like that. And it's like, dude, try and think for yourself critically, please. Being in a constant nebulous state of questioning everything without ever holding a proper position is cowardice, and it's intellectual laziness. Make a point. Take a stance somewhere. I have far more respect for people who actually say that like they believe in the conspiracy than people who just think it's interesting and then hear the counter arguments and somehow never like ditch away the conspiracy completely. It's really annoying. It is the most insufferable that I've ever had to deal with any kind of people. Question of topic. Have you played Disco Elysium? No, I have not. I hear it's extremely good, but one recurrent theme that I've brought up on my other live streams on my main channel is that I have a really hard time discovering new games these days. Right now, the main game I've been playing is Darkest Dungeon. I played it last year and I was really into it, and then like a month ago I started playing it again, and it's like XCOM meets Diablo. I just really like it. I know the second game is on sale right now, but I decided not to buy it even though it's on sale. It's gonna come back on sale at some other point, because even though I have 164 hours, I never actually managed to beat the game completely. Big Reality doesn't want you wasting your time on needless bickering. Yeah. Please, what are you saying, Goodlib? I don't understand. Please, what? What are you asking me? Please do? Play Disco Elysium? I mean, I could at some point, but like I said, the mental capacity to get through the learning curve of playing a new game when you already have so much on your mind, when you already don't actually have that much free time to begin with because you're focused on other things, it's rough. It's really difficult. The last big game that I played, that I had the time, play the game, yes. The last game I got to play, where is it? I don't think I have it installed right now. Yeah, Kingdom Come Deliverance. The only way I managed to play this game is because I took 2 weeks off work, my vacation. My family was also on vacation. My girlfriend and my stepson, they went to Jamaica, I think it was. Or the Dominican Republic that year, I'm not sure. So I had the whole house to myself, and I had nothing to do but play video games. And that's the only time I was able to discover a new game, and that was the game I played, and it was amazing. So because I already know the mechanics, I know that when I play KCD2, like, I'll probably have a better chance. But discovering any new games that have, like, any complicated stuff, it's very difficult. Fun political stuff in Disco to discuss. I'm sure. One of my favorite YouTubers, video essays, Sean, talked about how it's one of his favorite games, and, you know, I'll take his word for him. If you love yourself, get into League of Legends. Isn't that multiplayer? I hate multiplayer. You will never get me to play any games multiplayer. I hate it. I detest playing multiplayer. I am very much a solo player, which is kind of sad too, because on my main channel I do a lot of warband, and I often get invitations from people to play in online events, and I'm like, nah, thanks. I've always been a solo player. The only time I've played with other people would be like playing with my brother or some of my friends on the console when I was like a child or in high school. That's the extent to which I've played with other people. I do have some friends from my school with whom I used to play games together, and the multiplayer games we played, it wasn't against each other. It was like doing different things, like Space Engineers. That's a game we played together, and that was fun because we're just building stuff in space. You know, it's cool. But yeah, anyway, like that was the main stream. But I mean, I'm still here, and it's actually one of my shortest streams. I just wanted to do that for fun. I don't know that I'm actually gonna do like a cut stream of that. But hey, you people are still here and you're still chatting. I feel like chatting for a while, so you know, feel free to stick around. Maybe we can just hang out. Disco Elysium isn't hard to learn. It's more about making decisions and dealing with their consequences. Well, it's on my wish list. Let me see if it's on special right now. Yeah, Darkest Dungeon 2 is right now like 75% off. That's pretty good. It does often go... I see it often go on sale for very cheap, like not even $5. But it doesn't... No, right now I'm at Disco Elysium, the final cut, $47.99. When it goes on sale for like 90%, like maybe next time I'll buy it and I'll give it a shot. Sure. If there's one game that I would really like to play soon but haven't gotten to, it's Senua's Saga. I don't actually know how good it is, but this game here, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, is one of my favorite games of all time. It was an amazing work of art. And I was waiting for this one for a while, but by the time it came out, this is when I entered my phase of having a really hard time discovering new games. And I also kind of told myself for a while that I would not try and buy new games until I actually complete the games in my library, but I got like 200 games now, so there's no way that's ever going to happen. Anyway. Otherwise, I mean, listen, I made a quick announcement on a post, but the next video is going to be really crazy because it's about this. Ugh. That's gonna get wild. My script for it is like, I would say 95% done. I still like, I'm still unsure of some of the direction in which I go with it. So every time I go through it, I end up making more corrections. I might be overthinking it a bit, but this will be a pretty wild video. I don't really know what's gonna happen. When will the next Metatron laugh party be? I don't really have any plans on reacting to more Metatron. I did see yesterday, like, Anthony Gramuglia, who makes a lot of essays pertaining to the media. He made another reaction to Metatron's new grift on Nolan's Odyssey. I started watching that a little bit. It's fun. Like, Anthony's a fun guy. But I don't really have any plans, because, I mean... that's what I said in my last video I made on him. What's it about? I haven't really looked into that book. Oh. Do you know this guy, Marquis de Sade? Marquis de Sade is a noble from the 1700s, was a bit of a sex pest, and he made a bunch of really disturbing books, including this one, The 120 Days of Sodom. And it's extremely violent, extremely graphic, and just really rough all around, but there's a lot of philosophical themes in it pertaining to libertinage, atheism, and the story behind it is actually really interesting, because the guy, when he wrote the book, it's the guy right here, sadist, Marquis de Sade, S-A-D-E, his name, Sade, the word sadism comes from him, because of the themes in his books that involved a lot of torture and violence with sex. It was sadism, inflicting pain and humiliating people. That was his main thing in his books, and that's why the word sadism exists today. It's because of the Sade. Was it never finished, right? No, it wasn't unfinished. Like, that's what I was trying to get into. Like, the story of this book is basically he was in prison, and while he was in prison, he wrote the draft. This is the draft, and the draft doesn't have like a proper ending, and a bunch of stuff is unfinished, and it's really rough to read because it's unedited. Like, it's a first draft of a novel, basically. And he hid it inside inside the castle walls, and then eventually he was escorted out of prison, and then later during the French Revolution, the prison was destroyed, was the Bastille. And he basically spent the rest of his life thinking the book was forever lost. His manuscript was forever lost. But 100 years later, it got in the hands of a German collector, and the guy published it, and now this is what we have. So the history behind the book is as interesting as the history behind the Sade, and the content itself is deeply disturbing. I mean, listen, I did that as a joke to myself the other day while I was writing. I was like, what if I pick a random page and read a random line? Let's do it right now. Keep in mind this is in French, so I'm going to be roughly translating. Let's see. Hold on, like these are a little too vague. Basically, what I want to do is just grab a random sentence and try. Oh, I got a good one. Can I get the sentence in French? Sure. Okay, I got a good one right here. Pour réunir l'inceste, l'adultère, la sodomie et le sacrilège, il encule sa fille mariée avec une hostie. So, rough translation, to combine incest, adultery, sodomy, and sacrilege, he sodomizes his married daughter with sacramental bread. There you go. That's the random sentence I just picked. and then my camera freezes. Even my camera was like, nope. That was just one sentence. Yeah. Do you speak French, 24th Greek letter? Which is the omega based on the logo? Do you think he was actually a sadist in the Vive le Québec? Yes, exactly. Do you think he was actually a sadist in the medical sense or just creative? I think a little bit of both. I think for what he did, for what he believed, for what he preached, I think there needs to be like a sincere disconnect in your humanity. There needs to be... I think he was a sociopath. Yeah, I'm from Quebec too. Ah, ben salut man. Comment ça va? I think in that sense, he was definitely a sociopath, like I said. I think libertinage, the philosophy that he preached, is one in which reject any and all social norms of morality, of good and evil, in pursuit of your own pleasure, basically. But even that, I feel like you can only really get to that point. You can only really fully embrace that philosophy by not having a conscience. Because the thing he describes, like the characters in his books, like the one sentence I described, it's from a libertine who presumably did that specifically so, like he said, he could produce an act for himself that would include incest, sodomy, sacrilege, adultery. Like, the guy's whole thing is trying to break as many rules as possible at the same time while being cruel about it. Libertinage for him means rejecting everything that makes all of these things wrong because that brings him pleasure. You know what I mean? Isn't that hedonism? Hedonism, the difference between hedonism and libertinage is that libertinage is further. Hedonism hedonism is like, yeah, you know, like you divide every experience between pleasure and pain. But I don't necessarily think that hedonism specifically talks about it in the sense that you can have a utilitarian approach to hedonism, if that makes sense. Basically, the idea is that you can maximize pleasure and minimize pain for everybody as opposed to just yourself. This is what libertinage leaves out. If someone told you today, I think you should be able to do whatever you want as long as you don't hurt anybody, as long as you don't override the freedom and comfort of other people, I think most people could agree with that. It's a pretty generic sentiment, right? But libertinage says, no. You should override other people's comfort and freedoms if that's what brings you pleasure. That's why, that's where sadism comes from. Sadism is the idea, it isn't just the idea that you reject the well-being of other people for the sake of your own. It's that the pleasure you get is from inflicting pain on others. And that is something that you can find a rationale for doing in libertinage, but not necessarily in hedonism. Keep in mind that I'm talking about all of that stuff, and it's not like I'm like super versed into any of it. Like, most of my understanding is still very rudimentary. But this is why, like, if you go on Wikipedia, for instance, and you look up libertinage, it's going to say that it's a radical form of hedonism. You have the same structure, but it takes it even further. It's even worse. And what I would argue in that sense is that, and this is something I wrote in my drafts, is that basically, like, I think the only way that some, if not most billionaires today get to that point is because they are, in a sense, libertines themselves. The only way they accumulate that kind of wealth is by exerting power over other people, whether it's their employees or even the planet. If it brings them pleasure to have a $400 million yacht, no matter how destructive that is to the planet, that's what they do. In my mind, that makes them like libertines, you know? Nietzsche, I really don't know enough about Nietzsche. Isn't Nietzsche like the guy who came up with nihilism? There is an element of nihilism in libertinage in the sense that nothing matters except your pleasure. That's again, like, you can have so much, you know, so many different philosophies based on the slightest variation in the way you interpret it, you know? So yeah, my next video is on that. You want to try another sentence? Destructive, not destructful. Yeah, sorry. You know what I mean. Let's try another sentence, shall we? Oh my god. I'm gonna have a hard time reading this one. Okay, I'm gonna start in French first. Il fait mettre une fille nue à cheval sur un grand crucifix. Il la fout en con, en levrette, dans cette attitude, et de façon à ce que la tête du Christ branle le clitoris de la putain. It's kind of difficult to translate off the top of my head because, unfortunately, the French dialect is a bit older and the French structure is a little difficult, but let me try anyway. He places the woman naked on a huge crucifix. He basically gets her from behind in a way that Christ's head is right on her clitoris. So basically what I understand from this is that in that sentence, like they've got like, you know, like in the church, like in the old church, they used to have like those big crucifixes with a statue of Jesus on it. Basically, he's got her on top of the crucifix in a way that Jesus' head is right on her vagina, and he's also hitting her from behind. This is actually a part in my essay where I talk about one of the parts of the book that is really very much a product of its time, because I'm in a section right now that, if I recall, it's all about sacrilege. It's about insulting the church. It's about being fiercely secular. It's about degrading the very idea of God. And I'm sure in the 1700s, when that book was written, it would hit very hard, but the fact that everyone's an atheist these days, the shock kind of falls flat, you know? So this is one of the part of the books that kind of aged for the intent that he had by writing this horrific scene. It aged poorly, you know? So there's interesting parts about that. I think more that the strong make the values. Isn't Nietzsche against nihilism? I thought he positioned nihilism as like the bad ending. Again, I don't know anything about Nietzsche. I just know that I don't know anything, so. Imagine somebody totally new joins this video with no context. Well, kind of the joke is like, I don't give you any context to the book and I just read a random sentence, but all sentences are like this. That's the joke. So I'm doing that to you and to anybody who's jumping on the stream. That's pretty funny. Let me know if I should try another one, but I think people get the idea. Again, I don't really know. I think more that the strong make the values. Gottlieb, if you're saying that in reference for Nietzsche, wouldn't that mean that Nietzsche's philosophy is basically might makes right? I really don't know anything about... Let me be lazy here. And just ask Google. How do you even write his name? Nietzsche's philosophy rejects objective truth in favor of subjective perspectives, radically challenging the foundations of traditional Western morality, religion, and philosophy. He advocated for a passionate, life-affirming embrace of human struggle in earthly reality over otherworldly illusions. Okay, so yeah, no, there's definitely some elements of libertinage that you could draw in that as well, but Nietzsche was... he was there after de Sade. So de Sade's libertinage philosophy... pre-exists Nietzsche's philosophy. And I don't think Nietzsche was inherently like nothing matters, therefore you should like exert power over everyone if that's what makes you happy. I think it's more like, from what I'm reading here, it's like he wouldn't want people to define their life's purpose on some otherworldly being. You should focus on the real material world right now. If that's the case, I think that's in of itself, that's pretty reasonable. But again, I'm reading this for the first time. I don't want to fall into the Dunning-Kruger effect too quickly on that. My perspective of this book, because one of the main scholarly debates around this book is whether it's meant to be satirical or if for de Sade it's genuinely meant to be, erotic. And to me, I think, to use a modern term, I think it's a Schrodinger. I think the same way that, you would have like some far-right trolls online that would say some joke about the Holocaust or something. And it's only serious if you accept it at face value. And then if you call him out on it and say he's being a Nazi, he would say, whoa, I was just joking. I feel like that's de Sade right here. If you told de Sade that you actually quite enjoyed the book and found it quite arousing, as disturbing as it is, de Sade would look at you and be like, all right, cool, fist bump. But if you told him, yo, man, what the hell is wrong with you? What is this? You got so much horrendous crap in this. He would be like, hey, man, I was just joking. This is all satire, And there's historical precedence of de Sade doing that. During the revolution, he had to shift his positions constantly to survive the revolution, to not be seen as a monarchist, to not be seen too radical, to seeming radical. Like he would change his positions as a way of self-preservation. So he would do the same thing with his books. If people started calling him out on his books, he would say, hey man, I was just joking, you know? He would. Did the French sadists write all his books with such sadistic focus? I couldn't tell you because I didn't read the others, but it's my understanding that yes, that's why the term sadism exists, because it's a prevalent theme of all of his books. My headset shut off because I wasn't listening to anything. There you go. Let me guess, the word satire is based on a French writer also? Maybe. The word satire comes from the Latin word satur, meaning full. It specifically evolved from the ancient Roman phrase lanx satura, which literally translates to a full dish of various kinds of fruits. Over time, the phrase was used to describe any literary medley or mixed collection of things. The satire mix-up. During the Renaissance, writers mistakenly connected the word satire to the Greek mythological satyr, a mischievous half-human, half-goat creature. The noun first emerged in the French language in the 14th century before finding its way into the English language in the early 1500s as a way to describe poetry meant to ridicule prevailing vices. And yeah, so it comes from the French too. But there is definitely a satirical element to this book. Because one of the main things is like, listen, like I didn't really get into it, but like the main premise of this book is Epstein's Island. Literally. It's 4 rich dudes who kidnap a bunch of people, many of which are underage. And the whole point is called 120 Days of Sodom. It's because they take them into a castle for 120 days, and it's just them doing all the worst things you can possibly imagine for 4 months straight. That's the whole point of the book. But the main thing that's interesting, the main social commentary, the main satirical element, is that the 4 men in the book all represent different parts of the elite classes. One of them's a noble, one of them's a judge, one of them's a banker, and one of them's a bishop. So it's simultaneously villainizing the nobility, the clergy, the corrupt justice system, and the banks. That part is definitely intentionally made to be critical of the ruling class, if you will. That much is definitely true in the book. And I mean at the same time, like the book is very like secular. De Sade himself at the time was very critical of the church, and he was secular in the sense that like he rejected God entirely. He was radically atheist, and all these characters in the book, his main villains, are all atheists as well. So there's a lot of rejection of God. There's the part with the crucifix I just read. There's a lot of sacrilege where the point is to mock the institution of religion. But a lot of the people involved in all of these crimes in the book are priests themselves. The trope of priests being molesters and predators and stuff like that. The book is full of that. And it was written over 200 years ago. De Sade predicted Epstein. That's part of what I go into in my video, yeah. It's literally Epstein Island. And one of the things, I mean, you'll see for yourself in the video, but like one of the things that I said, you know, the part of the reason I was inspired to make this video talking about the book is because of everything that was going on with Epstein. You know, that was a couple of months ago, but like there was the main attorney for Trump who was interviewed by Congress and basically had to dismiss all the stuff with Epstein, even though like everybody knows it's going on. You know? And one of the things that I ended up saying about the book, 120 Days of Sodom, is I said, well, it turns out the least realistic thing about that book is that there's only 4 rich people involved. Because every time we heard about the Epstein files, we were looking at the emails, and you just saw like how many people were involved at all times. Different country leaders, the British monarchy, Mossad even at some point, I think, and all the big business people, Elon Musk, who bragged about not being involved with the Epstein files. There's emails of him begging to go to one of his parties and never got to go because he's a loser. By which I mean, like, all the Epstein creeps thought Musk was too lame to be in the club, but he wanted to be. And it's like the reason everything is out in the open and we know everything is going on, and the shameless exposure where they show bits of the Epstein files, but like 3/4 of the page is completely blacked out. And it's like, you know what they're hiding. We know what's there, and nothing's happening. And then I realized reading this book, like, all the libertines, because the thing is, for context, like, one of the main things that happens in this book is, like, well, they are in that castle for 120 days. Each day, they have a libertine prostitute, a veteran prostitute, a middle-aged woman. And each day, what she does is she retells a story of her life in which she either witnessed or experienced herself a specific violent sexual act that is meant to inspire the 4 villains to recreate these acts during their nightly orgies. And what that means is, even though there's only 4 rich people involved in that specific event that is told throughout the book, every story that the prostitutes tell has to do with some other wealthy libertine from different parts of the elite class. There's a lot of priests involved, there's a lot of merchants, there's a lot of bankers, there's a lot of judges, a lot of law enforcers, a lot of nobles. Basically, even though the book only includes 4 rich people in that one specific event that is told in the present time, every flashback in the book includes like one new complete freak who basically does the same thing. So the same way that you look at everything that's going on with Epstein, the Epstein files, and everyone that's involved in the emails, and everyone that went to the island, the book essentially describes that same massive network of wealthy freaks doing whatever they want and getting away with it all the time. And it's profoundly bleak. You know what I mean? That's why I'm making a video about it. Like, initially I was going for like a more of edgy, like, I read it so you don't have to, here's the most disgusting book ever written. And there's definitely a lot of that, for the main appeal. But what I'm really going to be trying to do is break down in very basic form the philosophy of libertinage, the history of the Sad's life, the history of how the book was made, the contents of the book itself, and, just make the obvious connections to the present. And also there's a bit of talking about like the concept of transgressive fiction, fiction that's written almost exclusively just to shock and gross people out. I also talk about like different movies, including the film adaptation of 120 Days of Sodom. Yes, there is a film adaptation. And I make parallels to it with other films like a Serbian Film and Cannibal Holocaust. So there's a lot going on in that video. Hopefully I nail it, like it's very experimental, new genre for me. As awful as Epstein's files are, Elon Musk being left out will always be funny. Yeah, I agree. In the future, when all people are equally rich, we can all go to Epstein Island. Exactly. So really, that's what's going to happen with the book. Hope the girlfriend is not too worried you reading that book. No. I told her it was really bad. Like the thing is, at some point, like the other day, she came by my desk to drop off something, and I was writing the script, and she started reading, and I'm like, you may not want to read this. She's like, what's it about? Is it like private? I'm like, no, it's not private. And then she sees the book on my desk, and she's like, oh, it's about the book, isn't it? I'm like, yeah, it's about the book. And she's like, oh, okay, well, whatever. Funnily enough, like my girlfriend, when it comes to like any kind of like media that makes people uncomfortable, like the one place where she draws the line is demons. If there's a horror movie and it features zombies, no problem. If it's like a slash serial killer, no problem. But if it involves demons, even if it's on a movie, she doesn't want to watch it. I never really understood it. Well, my girlfriend is like, this is the weird thing, because like I am totally agnostic, but my girlfriend is like super spiritual. It's so weird. She's got all these stones. She likes to burn a lot of sage around the house. I mean, to be fair, like I myself grew up in the church. My parents are Protestants, and I was the only one in my friend group who was basically going to church every Sunday until I was like 16. And now I don't go to church at all. And even though like my parents, we had like a complete disagreement on religion, we just learned to accept it and live our lives anyway. So when it comes to the spiritual stuff, I was already used to living with people who have like wildly different beliefs than I do. So that really never really affected me. But it is funny. At times. Exorcist must be a no-go then? No, absolutely not. She would never watch The Exorcist. Even movies like Army of Darkness, which is like the third movie in like the Evil Dead trilogy. The first movie was like really dark. It was a horror movie with demons and possessed people and stuff. The third movie just became like an action flick, and it's corny with all these one-liners and everything, and it's hilarious. Even that movie, when it has demons, even though like Ash is just like tearing them apart and it's just really funny, she would see the possessed people and she would be like, nope, no thank you, I'm good. She would turn around and she'd be like, yep, that's nice, that's very nice, okay, let me know when it's done. She completely blocks. Is she demonophobic? I have no idea. I think the one thing I could say, like the one thing I can think of really is just that she's black. You know, there's this stereotype of black people who, unlike white people, especially when it comes to horror movies, there's this trope in horror movies of white people always putting themselves in situations, you know, this family sees this creepy abandoned house and they're like, what a wonderful place to raise our family, and shocker, there's a ghost, you know? Actual black people, they see that house, they're like, I'm not even stepping near it. I'm just turning around and I'm forgetting this place exists. There's like a strong sense of self-preservation in the face of obvious potential problems. You know what I mean? And I feel like it's the same thing with her. Like for her, she's like, I hate the idea of demons and the negative energy so much that I don't even want to watch it in film form. You know, that's basically it. And that's the only thing I can think of that she will really not go for, because she'll basically watch anything besides that. Like, it's really not a problem. Possessing can be unsettling, like having a parasite, I guess. I have no idea. It's I don't think it's what it is at all. I think it's just like demons. In her own like spiritual worldview, you know, they suck out the positive energy out of you, and she wants nothing to do with that. Again, it's movies, so I always I wish I could handle horror better, because I love horror, but I hate being scared. I don't really tend to get scared by horror movies. I can think of maybe a handful of movies that really scared the crap out of me, but most of them, they're kind of just like dark and violent, but they never really scare you. I wouldn't say The Exorcist scared me. I was more like impressed by its effects, rather. The one scene that kind of caught me by surprise in the first Exorcist is when the girl comes down the stairs upside down, crawling like a spider. That took me by surprise. Or when she's got the crucifix, you know? You don't expect that at all. That was pretty bad. But other than that, I mean, the one movie, I wonder if she could play Warlock in D&D. Talking about my girlfriend? Well, we never really played D&D around here. It sounds really fun, like, but I don't have a community of people with whom to play any kind of tabletops. So, you know, if she played a D&D character, she would probably be like, what would she be? She'd be like an Amazon. I don't know if that's really like a class. I'm thinking of like the Amazon class in Diablo 2. That's probably what she would lean towards. Or just like a... Not a wizard. A wizardress? Are they just witches? Because I feel like witches can be just as evil as they can be good. But wizardress, if that's the proper term, that would be the proper, I think. Something like that. She would want to be someone that fights hand to hand and has powers and is just like really powerful overall and sexy while doing it. That'd be her thing. Yeah, what was I gonna say? Like the two movies that I've watched that when I watched them they scared the crap out of me was Blair Witch Project. I was relatively young when I watched it though, and Paranormal Activity. Paranormal Activity, the first one, is nerve-wracking. That is a brilliant horror movie. And of course it features demons, so you'll never see my girlfriend watching that. But the first Blair Witch, brilliant as well. It's funny because some people think it's like either like overrated or it turned out to be really bad. Like I think like some of the actors for that movie received like the Raspberry Award for worst performances. And I thought they were just fine. I don't understand. It is a lot of shaky cam though. It kind of like redefined, modernized the found footage style of movies. Which then you also see in Paranormal Activity, you know. Now I'm more into like a band of like disturbing horror movies. Movies that kind of like shock you with just how gross they are. Cannibal Holocaust was one of the first movies that I saw that did that, but what makes Cannibal Holocaust especially rough is knowing that when you see an animal die in that movie, it was actually a real animal. It's one of the main examples brought of like animal cruelty in movies. That movie was done in like 1980, I think. And let's say the regulations were a little more loose at the time. So as soon as that movie was done, basically like the entire film industry across the globe said, okay, we are never hurting animals again because that was just really bad. So knowing that this is real killing of animals in that movie can make it especially hard to watch for a lot of people. But the rest of the movie, even when it doesn't involve animals, is still like extremely violent. At the time, the movie was so violent that the director was actually arrested for murder because people thought he actually killed the people in his movies for real. So he had to show up in court with the actors to prove they were in fact still alive. So that's pretty wild. There's also a Serbian film, which I watched just last year. This one I had heard multiple times that it was actually one of the most disturbing films ever made. So I watched it, and there was definitely some moments I was like, ugh, that's a little much. But in hindsight, I'm fine. The one next movie I want to watch is Martyr. 24 Greek Letter. Maybe you've heard of that one. It's a French movie. And it's fairly recent too either. I think it was made just before a Serbian film. So like 2008 maybe. I was reading about it the other day and I was like, that would be my next test. Funnily enough, my sister, she's really into like the disturbing transgressive fiction crap. So when I told her I watched the Serbian film, she was like, I thought it was okay, but like here's a list of stuff I found way worse. And she just starts sending me a bunch of movies. Her joke is that she's dead inside, so it doesn't matter. A wizard has magic through knowledge, a sorcerer has magic through a heritage, a warlock has magic through a pact with a magic creature, a witch is just one of the above, but also a woman. Oh well. I think she likes magic, but she also pictures herself... I don't know if you guys know the lore, because I don't remember seeing you guys on the main live streams on the main channel. But I have like this recurrent theme on my main channel... when I play Warband or Fallout or XCOM, that I always have a black female character called Skylar. And Skylar is like my girlfriend's spiritual alter ego. She's like a superhero, basically. She's a Superman... she's what Superman is to Clark Kent. She's like the superhero to my girlfriend. My girlfriend's name isn't actually Skylar, but her superhero is Skylar. And she's just like this really gorgeous, fit, black woman that's scantily clad. And whatever situation you put her in, she's always witty, she's always fighting for the underdog, she always does the right thing, and she kicks ass. That's the whole concept of Skylar. And basically every time I play an RPG, any game that allows me to create a character, this character now is Skylar. It's a beautiful black woman, and she does the right thing. That's my thing. I think she sees Skylar like in the same sense, like in terms of like her devastating power, she's kind of like the Doomslayer. She would just show up, just drop down into a swarm of demons with 2 swords and just like twirl around and cut everything in her path, and she'd look real good while doing it. That's the idea. My name is Skylar White, yo. Exactly. I doubt the artistic value in a movie trying to appear as snuff as possible. Well, it's part of the appeal. It's kind of like reality TV. You know, reality TV is largely fake these days, but it kind of gives it this element of like extra immersion that brings you closer to the story. So it can be a form of delivery that works, and sometimes it may not. But I mean, because the whole thing, like, because you're talking about snuff films, but like the entire thing in the Serbian film is that it's a guy, an actor, who's put in a movie, and he realizes the movie's actually a snuff film. So things turn very violent very quickly. That's the theme behind the Serbian film, and I think as a concept is very interesting. The Cannibal Holocaust movie also features segments that are found footage, which is interesting. So I definitely think there's some element to that can be appealing. But really, we also have to be honest. Something I go into in my essay on 120 Days of Sodom, in the essay, I wrote some of it currently, is that I do feel that a lot of transgressive fiction, films like Cannibal Holocaust, Serbian film, 120 Days of Sodom, that a lot of these movies sometimes tend to justify their oversaturated use of gore and violence by saying that the movie has a deeper meaning when it doesn't really. A lot of it is kind of just I'm losing my word. Gratuitous. Am I saying it correctly? Like this. It's like it's just violence for the sake of violence. It's being violent. It's transgressive in that it's using violence to shock the viewer out of their comfort. And to the extent that I watch a Serbian film thinking to myself, is it actually going to be able to shock me? It can make for an interesting experience. But if you told me like, oh, like there's all like these symbolic themes around the film, I'm like, yeah, sometimes there is. I don't want to claim that movies don't always have themes, and I don't want to discourage people from being media literate. But sometimes I think they overplay it a bit, where they say like, oh, like there's actually like a lot of stuff going on in those movies. And exactly 24 Greek Later, it's just edgy. It's just edgy, and I feel like part of the people making those movies feel bad about the fact that it's just edgy, so they try and justify the edginess by actually saying that there's a lot of underlying themes. But even understanding these underlying themes just makes you realize that those underlying themes could have been expressed without that excessive use of violence. They're not interconnected. They don't coexist together. You can be extremely violent and not necessarily have that message, just as you could have that message and you don't need to be that violent. You're only that violent because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to be edgy. That's it. Because like you're asking, like a Gottlieb, the Serbian movie made political points too. It's difficult to say. When I read up on the film, the writer who wrote the film, one of the main things he talked about was colonialism. He talked about like the rampant, abusive, violent exploitation of one country over another. And the way he thought about that is that he had seen this one porn actor make this series of movies where you would go to Eastern Europe, to impoverished areas of Eastern Europe post-Soviet collapse, where there was like this strong recurrent theme in these movies that he was kind of just abusing, having his way with the local woman, and when he was done with them, he would like literally like just ditch them back. And he said he found like this uncomfortable tone of colonialism from that, because it just felt like the dehumanization of a different culture. It just felt like the dehumanization of its people, and using them in a very clearly exploitative manner. And so when you take into account that the people who were shooting the film in a Serbian film turn out to be violent, turn out to be making a snuff film, and they're always kind of shady in the background, and the niche clientele that is implied to be consuming these movies is rich foreigners, then yeah, you can see the movie transposes that same form of colonial exploitation. But if you miss that from the film, and all you're seeing as you're watching it is the story of an actor going into a movie and then realizing it's a snuff film and trying to get out of it, and that's all you see, and you miss the thematic, I don't think you missed out on the film. I don't think you necessarily misunderstood the film. You know what I mean? That's what I'm talking about. And even like 120 Days of Sodom, like obviously like in that book, like he's preaching, is the term you're searching for objectification? Objectification, not really. Objectification means that you are turning someone into an object like for your own personal pleasure, right? Yeah, that is part of it. But typically colonialism and the exploitation, as it's mentioned, is about like a broader systemic exploitation of resources from one culture to another. So it's not the same, quite the same. In terms of objectification, the way I tend to use it is specifically like when you're talking about like objectifying people. Exploitation of resources is not objectifying material goods, because material goods are already kind of objects, you know what I mean? Was there a movie that you watched that went too far? It really depends on the sense that you describe going too far, because to me there's two ways of talking about it. One of them is like what it's depicting on screen, and one of them is the treatment of the people involved in the production. As a far left person myself, who's gone on movie sets, who has done movies, who went to film school, and I've worked on some TV productions, one of the things that concerns me the most is the well-being of the people who's working on them. You know, like a decade ago, less than a decade ago, we had like the whole Me Too movement, which is when it became apparent that like a lot of women in the industry were being exploited, were being objectified, and were being sexually harassed to varying degrees by the producers, by the directors, by their fellow actors. And you have instances of that transposing into the movie, where to me that makes it seem like it's going too far. An example of that I can think of, which I find to be abusive and going too far for no reason, would be The Shining. You guys know The Shining, like the original movie with Jack Nicholson? Famously, there is a scene where the main character, played by Jack Nicholson, is going up the stairs and he's being like very menacing towards his wife. Like this is the part where he's starting to lose his mind and he's becoming like violent. And the actor that plays the wife, she's just stepping back with a baseball bat, you know, like ready to hit him if he gets too close. That scene on the set took like 120 takes, because the director Kubrick, who's labeled a perfectionist, I think he was just being abusive if you ask me. He basically tortured the actors to get them to go through that scene, and especially the actress. He would be verbally abusive towards her. He would scream at her to try and get her to that emotional state that he wanted her to have on screen. And knowing that and watching the movie, I think it goes too far. Hey, Shortcut, you're very late, but it's okay. We're just chilling here. For the past hour, we've just been talking about stuff. To me, that goes too far. The other example that I brought up earlier is in Cannibal Holocaust. They killed real animals in that movie. That goes too far for me. So any movie that, in order to reach their level of shock, they actually have to hurt real people or real animals, to me, that's going too far. If you're talking about, like, in terms of the art itself, in terms of what they're depicting in the movie, going too far, I don't think I've ever seen something that actually goes too far. You can see something that goes beyond, like, what you could personally stomach, and, like, okay, like, I don't want to watch that, like, this is way too much. And an example of that would be in a Serbian film. In a Serbian film, I'm gonna put a spoiler now, so cover your ears. if you don't want to hear it, there is a scene where they show the assault of a newborn. And the guy literally calls it like newborn. That's the genre that he's coming up with. And I mean, you don't see it like explicitly. You don't see the genitals or anything like that, but you can clearly see, you know, and it's a rough watch. I talked to somebody who watched the film and they told me that when they saw that part, they had it on a DVD, they took the DVD out, they snapped it in half and dumped it into the trash. So I saw that scene, and to me, that's the one scene in the movie that really grossed me out. Where I was just, on my scene, I was just like, my jaw dropped, like, in disgust. And if it lasted like 30 seconds more, I would have started skipping ahead. Because I was just like, oh my god, like, it's way too much, like, what the hell. Wasn't the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie or having also a scene that goes too far? I think where the actress was sitting with the family at the table. It's possible. I mean, there's a lot of movies from that specific period, like the 70s and 80s. There was a lot of movies that pushed the boundaries of what was socially acceptable to depict in movies, right? So there was a lot of violent movies that were credited with doing that. Clockwork Orange by Kubrick is one. Cannibal Holocaust, Salo, 120 Days of Sodom, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And there was also a lot of movies where, it's kind of what I was talking about, movies that are just being edgy but don't really have any subtext to it that is worth considering seriously. This is like the Grindhouse era that they're talking about. And it's just like a lot of gratuitous, edgy, violent movies, and there's really not much more to it other than, yeah, this is violent. Friday the 13th, I think, would be such movies, for instance, because like the slasher genre that it created, a bunch of stupid teenagers that go to the camp, they have sex and then get killed in the process, and then they run and trip, and somehow the guy who's walking behind them always catches them up. To me, like, it's too stupid. Speak No Evil probably has the most horrifying scene I've ever seen, and I've never even heard of that film. So I probably should add it to my list if I'm trying to challenge myself. But yeah, so this is what I'm talking about. So there's a lot of movies, and I was talking about Martyrs, just a moment ago. This is another movie that's known for being deeply disturbing with its graphical depictions of violence. So that's something that I'm curious to watch and see if I can stomach it. But that's kind of what it comes down to. Nobody watches these movies to get the subtext, even if there is any. They watch it because it's edgy, and they want to see if they can handle it. And when these movies, the directors come out and say like, oh, well, you know, I was trying to reflect on colonialism, or I was trying to have a deeper meaning. I'm like, well, maybe you were, but I think you're just justifying the fact that your movie is really just being watched because it's violent, you know? That's my thought. If anything, like, I was trying to think of like the one type of any movies that, apart from like cheap grindhouse stuff, or transgressive fiction like that, that is really like almost completely apolitical, and that you can really just enjoy them on the surface for what they are, and they're actually good, and they have a good balance of a good story, an entertaining story, and violence. I would say the Tarantino films. Some of them. I mean, the most political it gets would be Django Unchained and Inglourious Basterds, and these are, in effect, revenge fantasies. Really, that's what they are. But a movie like Kill Bill, it's really just about revenge. You don't really have to think about it much more than that, and I don't think Tarantino really expects you to. You would probably think like, oh, well, if you find a deeper meaning to it, a sense of female empowerment, like, sure, good for you, but like, it's a movie about vengeance. Fashioned in a manner of all the cheap spaghetti westerns and samurai movies he used to watch as a kid, you know? Watch it, it's good but horrifying. Speak No Evil, okay, don't watch the remake. Okay, sure. For me, the movie Funny Games was already too much. Another movie, I have no idea what that is. Funny Games. From 2007. Satirical psychological thriller. I mean, 6 out of 10. It's a mid movie, I guess. Though at the same time, these movies tend to be polarizing by nature. Some people will say it's good because it's really violent. Some people will say it's bad because it's really violent. So they always end up like down in the middle somewhere. So no, like I said, I can't think of any like. There are movies that completely tie their edginess to the subtext. If you don't get it, you don't even get to him. You don't even get the impact of how horrifying it is. It's possible. I'm sure these movies exist. I'm just saying. Some movies are not like that. It'd be interesting, like if I'm told, like, because I don't know, like May, if you just tune back in, but we're talking about a Serbian film, and Serbian film's main subtext behind it is one of exploitation and colonialism. If you miss that subtext, I don't know that it necessarily gives you a better appreciation for the violence in it. You're still just watching it because it is violent. That's why I gave the example of Speak No Evil. Okay, so Speak No Evil, 2022. How is there a remake if it was already made in 2022? Probably made by like a non-English speaking country, and America just decided to make a lazy remake, right? I agree with what you're saying, just saying can be done, right? Exactly, so, you know, we understand each other. There are... 1987 original, 1997. Oh, Funny Games. Okay, Funny Games. Oh, yeah, I see it. Okay, so I would need to get that one. All right. Sure. Hydration time. Whenever I start speaking, my nose, whenever I speak for too long, my nose gets stuffy. I don't understand. I have very poor vocal endurance. Yeah, you nailed it. It's an American remake. Exactly. Like, even Martyrs that I'm talking about, it's a French horror film. And the remake, American remake, apparently it really sucks. You know? Alright, there was this Spanish film that I actually watched the remake first, not knowing it was a remake from a Spanish film. And my brother told me the Spanish remake is really good. I don't remember what the name is, but it's a found footage film with a zombie outbreak inside a block, an apartment block that is completely quarantined or something. And I think also for that, like, they changed the ending in the remake. I'm not sure. I found the remake pretty decent, like, as like a... Damn it. Stupid webcam. I found it decent. But apparently it's pretty bad compared to the original. They do that all the time. And I hate it, because it's like... It is very American to want your own movies in American English, right? What is so hard about Americans watching foreign films? I don't understand. I tend to be a purist when it comes to my movies. If I watch a movie on Netflix and it was made in a different language, I watch it in a different language with the subtitles. My girlfriend, she's like, nah, man, I need the dubbing. And I'm like, the dubbing sounds so bad. It sounds so bad. You can clearly see it's off sync, and it's just really bad. I would say the worst is probably like animes. I don't actually watch anime, but my stepson, he watches a lot of anime, and every time I hear the dubbing in English, I'm like, this is so over the top. And they all sound the same. It's ridiculous. I actually really like the remake, but the changed ending ruins the movie, in my opinion. Oh, okay. It's like if they remade Squid Game in America. I mean, I know they're gonna make a new series in English in America, but like, that's dumb. One of the examples, for instance, is like the Metro games, based on the Metro books. You know the Metro games in Russia post nuclear war, and they're all hiding in the Metro system with all the radioactive monsters and everything. Like, I know the author of these books was approached to make a movie adaptation in America, where they would be like either under New York or under Washington. And even the author said, like, how are you gonna make like the Red Line faction in there? How are you gonna make the Fourth Reich? You know, because you got these new civilizations building underground, and they're deeply tied to the culture around Russia. So the Red Line is a group of metro stations where they became like hardline Soviets. And they try and do everything equitably, but they're also very authoritarian, and they tend to be pretty hostile towards everyone else. But you also have the fascists, who became the Fourth Reich. That's what they call themselves. And then you have other stations that are more neutral and stuff like that, and it's very interesting. But the author was like, this is very much tied to the Russian and European history in which I wrote the setting. How are you going to translate that into America? It's going to suck. So he refused because of that. I have the books. I read I have the games. I played 1 and 2 plus Exodus. Although I think they re-released it recently. Metro is literally a commentary on Russian politics, and they wanted to adapt it to America. Exactly, that's my point. Like, what would you have in America? Just different capitalist factions? The McDonald's faction and the Burger King faction? So yeah, this is what I'm talking about. Going back to horror movies, I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm really at a point right now. If I saw a horror movie that actually scared me, that's pretty rare. But I'm leaning more towards like the disturbing and see if I can handle it. You know. Anyway, like we've already been at this for close to 3 hours, which is usually the run time that I go for these. And I had an initial idea for what I wanted to do with Professor Dave and that idiot, and then we just completely derailed because I kind of lost interest in it. I mean, I made the point that I wanted to make. I just really hate these people. And I'm happy to talk about anything else, so, you know, if you guys want to bring up anything else, feel free to. Hostel, I haven't watched the first one. The first one is relatively old, isn't it? Like early 2000s? I haven't watched it in a long time, so I barely remember it. Funnily enough, I watched Hostel 3 recently. I think they put it on Netflix. I think this one was like direct to video. And it's really on par with, what's the name of the guy who made all these cheap horror movies and he started the first Hostel? They're really like shallow horror films. Hostel was a pretty decent concept, I think. I watched the third one and it was stupid. It was so dumb. There wasn't like really any shock to it. And the ending was like so dumb. It was the ending a teenager would have come up with. It was so stupid. Have you seen Sinister? Have I? I think I'm conflating it with something else. I don't think I have. I think I'm confusing it with The Ring. I don't think I've seen Sinister. No, I'm gonna have to add it to my list. The thing is, I work evenings, like 5 days a week, so every time I come back home, my girlfriend's already hogging the TV, so I don't get to watch a lot of stuff. But on my evenings, I enjoy from time to time, like just watching a horror movie and seeing what it's like. Funnily enough, like during my last vacation in fall, like I decided to watch a horror movie and I picked one at random, completely forgotten I had already watched it. It was Conjuring, and it's not that great. There is that famous scene with the clap behind the back of the head. It's like the one jump scare in the entire movie. And as it happened, I was in the middle of like going to the fridge to grab some snacks, and then when I came back, I was like, oh yeah, that's true, that happened. Nah, whatever. Definitely don't watch Speak No Evil if you're going to sleep afterwards or something. Reserve it for when you have a day off or something like that. Let's actually look it up. 2022 film. Where was it made? What country? It's Dutch. Barbarian was nice. You talking about the TV show? Or something else? Barbarian, I'm thinking of Barbarians, the one with the Romans and the Germanic tribes. you seen Hereditary? Jesus Christ. Okay, May, I'm going to invite you. Actually, don't look it up. The movie is better without context. Jesus Christ. Okay. A movie that I watched that was also found footage that I actually really enjoyed, and actually found myself enjoying the sequel as well, was Creep. You guys ever seen that? It was, I think, released directly on Netflix. It was really good. Nope. Nope was pretty good. I really like the take on the flying saucer being like an actual living organism as opposed to like a spaceship in the sense that you would imagine. That was a really interesting concept, but it's not the better movie that Peele made. Get Out was very solid, but I also enjoyed Us. Us was really good. Creep was alright. Yeah, I feel it had a good concept. I was disappointed with the ending. I didn't feel it needed. Like, that's what I told my dad at the time. When I watched it, I said, like, Creep, like, it had, like, a very interesting build-up throughout. But I found the ending to be rather cliche. I didn't feel the need for the main villain to be, like, a serial killer or something. Who actually does that as, like, a routine, and that is just one of the many times he does that, you know? I thought that was, like, the bad part of the movie because of that. You know, people meet creepy people in their lives all the time that make them uncomfortable, that overshare, that get in their personal space, and that escalation alone, even if it never reaches a classic horror climax, if you will, I feel that would have been very bold if they just stayed on that, the stalking, the stuff like that, because that's a real story for lots of people. That's, if anything, that's relatable, which is difficult. It's difficult to relate to horror movies, you know? So that was very good. That's what I enjoyed about Creep. Then I watched Creep 2. And I really loved it. Because now, knowing who the guy is, knowing his patterns, and having be confronted by a character that's actually used to be around this kind of weird creepiness and not flinching at all his attempts to make her uncomfortable, it created a very interesting dynamic that I actually liked. The ending was also a little weird, but coming off the first one, where they decided to go with it, I thought was brilliant. A horror movie is really difficult to produce. The moment you make the story interesting, it's a non-horror movie with horror elements. It's such a difficult balance. The Conjuring, for example, is great, but it's not a horror movie. It's just a horror theme, if you get what I'm saying. I absolutely do, and it's totally right. I think a big problem with it is that, for one, especially today, you're going into so many tropes. Everything has been explored over and over again. It's difficult to come up with an interesting theme that's going to shock people the same way the movies that created the tropes did. You know? The first Alien movie, brilliant horror movie the first time you see it. It really keeps you guessing as to what's going to happen. The production design, the show of lights, the claustrophobic sense of being stuck with an alien creature in a ship and no way of escaping, no understanding of how the alien works. To me, that was brilliant. But you could never make that movie again today. It wouldn't work, because now it's a trope people expect it. And it's the same thing. The Conjuring was good in a sense that what it showed, it did it really well, and the performances were great and all. But Exorcist started that. Exorcist was the one that really took it up a notch. And Exorcist, in that sense, like, it shocks everybody, but it's difficult to make again. And they made so many Conjuring movies from since then, right? There's a bunch of movies that are like kind of aligned with The Conjuring, but are not necessarily The Conjuring. Like there's the Demon Nun or something. I watched that one in theater, and it's the same thing. It's done well, relatively speaking, but it's not scary in that sense, because you're just doing the same tropes. It's really just a superhero movie where the main characters are fighting paranormal beings. Exactly. Strangely enough, the most hardcore horror movie fans are people who are not affected by its horror or splatter. Yeah, because they build up tolerance too. There's that. Like my sister, she jokes that she's dead inside, and that's why none of these movies do anything for her. But really, it's just because she's built up a tolerance, and she was like in her late teens, she had like this very edgy phase, and she enjoyed watching these movies, and now like they don't do anything for her, you know? So that's really it. So yeah, basically like horror movies, it's really like the really good ones, they're the ones that innovate. That's really what I can say about it. And this is why, like, we're talking about Creep, I think there's a tendency in horror movies to be too lethal. For a lot of people in everyday life, the things that scare them the most rarely kill them. And I think if people kind of explored that more in movies, that make for more relatable experiences that would really plunge people into the horror, into the unknown, into this inside feeling that you have no real safety, you know? Okay, well, yeah, I mean, you're really making me curious with Speak No Evil, so I'm gonna have to try that out eventually. If a movie that aims primarily to be gross manages to gross me out, I consider it a win on the film. In that sense, Urban Film did manage to gross me out. Even the adaptation of 120 Days of Sodom managed to gross me out. My favorite horror movie is John Carpenter's The Thing. I love it. It's a great movie. Yeah, I definitely like that one. And it's also a pillar of its own genre. The one of... you can even say it's a pillar in of itself, because even that's a remake, I believe. Or it's based on a book, which is wildly different to begin with. Or no, I think I'm thinking actually of... it is a remake, but I'm also thinking of like a different movie for something else that's also based off something else. The Thing is really good. And the CGI, the practical effects, they aged surprisingly well too. I thought it was pretty good. And, some of the scenes, some of them, they don't look that great, but some of them still look really cool. Remake it is. Well, I mean, like John Carpenter's movie, The Thing, is a remake. There was an older The Thing movie in the 1950s, I believe, which is not... It's not quite the same. But, you know. And in fact, like, the movie, The Thing, was one of the primary influences, I think, behind The Eightful Eight. Tarantino's movie, of all the people stuck in a cabin during a storm. An issue with paranormal horror for me is that the paranormal being is completely nurtured in its scariness when you imagine yourself in its place. So I think this to mean that, like, you know, like, it's really presented and emphasized in a way to make it scarier than it normally would be. Even if you come up with a good in-universe justification, like weakening the kid for a possession, the awareness of the thing actively trying to scare you makes it less scary. Yeah, I understand, like, in the sense that, like, you could say that these paranormal beings in these movies have very straightforward goals that aren't hard to grasp. So you can kind of easily guess where it's going most of the time because of this. If you had a movie where The Thing, where it's trying to infiltrate the group, but it's also trying to hide when they're looking for it. It's mostly acting on survival as opposed to offense a lot of time. And that makes rooting it out more difficult. That can create an interesting dynamic. Whereas if it's just a demon that's lurking in the corner and it's just waiting for an opportunity to possess you so it can then mess around with the rest of the people, that's not... It's predictable, you know? There's also the fact that, like, the ambience, the use of lighting and shadows, the music, the slow approach, like, there's a big recipe in the cinematography that also makes it, you know, a little too predictable nowadays. It's part of a greater trope. A paranormal being shouldn't scare you by trying to scare you. It should scare you by doing its own thing and your fear being the side effect. It should be completely beyond your understanding. That's an interesting way of looking at it. Ideally, you shouldn't even begin to understand it all beyond patterns. It should just be. You see, this brings it back to what I was talking about with Alien. In Alien, the complete mystery, the lack of understanding, is rooted in the alien's biology, right? It starts with the egg. You don't know what the thing is doing on the guy's face, the face hugger. You don't know how quick the alien grows. You don't know if it's going to grow bigger. You don't know about the acidic blood. You don't know about its behavioral patterns. And so you're kind of just trying to deal with that. And that lack of understanding is part of what makes the alien very scary. He's an apex predator, but at the same time, you know. So no, I understand what you mean. So a lot of movies can nail that very well. But other movies, they kind of just fall into the same tropes, knowing it works, and eventually it becomes just predictable and cliche. Another example of what it does, a place where it's done really well, in my opinion, is in Paranormal Activity. Like, yes, in Paranormal Activity, like, you have a demon whose whole thing is possessing and creating disturbances around the house. But the movie also gives you a clear structure through which you expect the demon to escalate its aggression, but the fear comes from not knowing how it will do that. And it's keeping you guessing as to what's next. And that's brilliant. When you give straightforward goes to the paranormal, you humanize them. At that point, the paranormal would work better as a real plausible serial killer or something. True. But this is what I mean. Like, it always comes down to how it's done. To me, the demon in Paranormal Activity, the movie, the first one, has a very straightforward goal. But again, like, the way it keeps you guessing as to what's next, I think is also part of, like, how it works very well. Sorry, I kind of got distracted by Kutla, but Yo Sir Duke, Have to Go was fun, and by the love of François Marquis de Sade, play Disco Elysium. Sure, man, at some point. Like, The Conjuring 2 had an incredible twist, but the idea of a demon just planning things out like that just makes it not a demon, just a smart serial killer or something. Great villain, but not a great horror villain. Hold up, guys. But anyway, hey, we're just about reaching the 3-hour mark, so that's gonna be my cue. So yeah, hey, it was fun talking about horror movies. It'd be fun if at some point we had like some movie nights on stream or whatever. Just an idea, but it could be cool. So anyway, I'm planning the video on 120 Days of Saddam. I'm planning on hopefully recording it next week, which means we could have a release in maybe the next 2 or 3 weeks. That's what I'm hoping. But other than that, I don't really have other immediate plans for the channel. I felt like doing this react with Professor Dave because I just saw it and I just had to talk about it. I did say initially that I was not going to watch Professor Dave's video until I made my video because I didn't want his retrospective video to influence my thoughts. But now that I've done my stream, yeah, I'm definitely going to go watch him now. So thanks for showing up, mate. Thanks for showing up, Gutleg. And I'm going to try and see your name again to make sure I get it properly. Kenya, I don't know if you're still here, but thank you so much for the donation. I really appreciate it. £10. Thank you. And y'all, I might do some more live streams. If there's ever like anything you want me to react to the stream or whatever, you can always like let me know like in my Discord server, in the Duke's Politics channels, if there's something you would like my thoughts on. That could be very interesting. Bye bye, I'll go back to watch what I missed. Well, thank you, Quick Letter, puis yeah, you said you're Québécois, right? Fait que on se revoit la prochaine fois, man. Puis si t'aimes mon contenu, tu pourrais aussi checker ma chaîne Terry Duke si t'aimes Mountain Blade Warband. Je fais beaucoup de live stream là-dessus aussi. So yeah, well, thank you all so much, guys. I will be back on the main channel to live stream Prophecy of Pandora on Friday, hopefully. And until then, you all have a great rest of your day. And I'll see you next time.